It is now 5 p.m., June 4th, 2019. And I call to order the regular meeting of the City Council of the City of Victorville. In the City Council sitting is the Library Board of Trustees, Southern California Logistics Rail Authority, Southern California Logistics Airport Authority, successor agency to the Victorville Redevelopment Agency, the Victorville Joint Powers Financing Authority, the Victorville Water District, and the city is housing asset successor. May we have roll call, please?
Councilmember Cox.
Here.
Councilmember Gomez.
Present.
Councilmember Jones.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Ramirez. Mayor Garcia.
Here. I do have 2 speaker cards at this time. The first one is Cynthia Gomez. Did you want to speak?
Good evening. I submitted a series of questions. I was here last time and I wanted the council members to address my concerns regarding the demolition of my property by the city of Victorville. Did anybody get a chance to read them? I did so today. I actually was driving over here from Orange County.
Yes, I'm aware of your questions.
Okay, you're aware of them. Okay. So is that something that I can speak on? Will they be discussed? Will someone get back to me?
You can speak on anything related to what's on the agenda or anything related to city business at this point.
But it has to be on the agenda.
Okay, I thought you guys are having it on the agenda.
We have a closed session item on the agenda, that's it.
Okay, so is it something that I can bring up? I can discuss?
You can discuss your concerns right now, certainly related to that item, yes.
Okay, so I'll mention the questions. Well, you guys have the questions. There's 6 questions on there. And mainly my concern is I don't know if the city's aware that that particular property was in escrow. So as far as what I'd like the city to address is how they will be making good on my loss of that escrow and that transaction. If needed, I mean, we can meet. I can have that investor meet with all of us and decide how we're going to resolve this. That's basically the core of it. But there is a series of questions that hopefully will get addressed. Okay. I don't know if I have time limit.
You still have 2 minutes.
I still have 2 minutes. I talk really fast. So, okay. Why aren't other Old Town properties being held to the same standard as mine? Which others of the many vacant properties in Old Town are scheduled to be demolished without proper notice? And why did the city prevent me from obtaining power multiple times to provide lighting and a safety system to the property? And are the council members aware of the many requests to meet with development that I made that were either ignored or declined? Why did the city prevent me from, well, you guys already have that. Are the council members, okay, I already have that. What is the pro-development process the city claims to have? And what is the city willing to offer to make good on the damage to my building, property use, future use, as well as opportunities lost? So that's pretty much it.
Thank you. Blanca Gomez.
So I received, as all of you up there also received, a notice from the constituent that just happened to speak up here. And so if you guys didn't receive it, I'm going to make sure that it's on the record. We might have received it a few minutes ago or not, but I want to make sure everyone is aware of what is going to be taking place. This is a closed session item. And as a council member and as a constituent, I find the responsibility to not only be informed, but also help assist my council members and administration also be informed. So the letter is addressed to each one of us. It says, esteemed council members, due to the unforeseen damages caused to the property that was demolished, I put together some of the questions that I would hope that would be expected and considered from each one of the council members, including administration. Looks like the Old Town properties were not being held to the same standards according to this constituent. And if that was the case, I think we should remedy what should be rightfully some individual property owners' acknowledgement. And if that's not the case, I think we should also render a response of, we have equality, we just need to make sure that we communicate that. The second question pertains to the demolition and the property notice, which is something that we're going to be talking about in closed session. Was it proper notice? Hopefully we get legal advice, formal, if it was or if it wasn't, because it's a matter of interpretation on many occasions that I do see. And if the constituent believes that she was being prevented from benefiting by having property there, now that we do have lighting, how is that going to change now that we have demolished that property, if at all, and if it benefits even the property owner who still has property credits in terms of having that same placement of her parcel? And then I don't know, I personally as a council member, when I'm sitting up there, have no knowledge or awareness of what the development property processes or standards are, so I would like to also be understanding a little bit more of what those processes are. I just immediately was quick, something got noticed 3 days in, and I wasn't sure what was happening. And if we are, if we as council members, are we being perceived as ignoring something, or are we just not understanding that there's issues in the community and we're probably not going out there and finding out these issues? I think for someone to come in here and be able to say, hey, are you guys ignoring me? It probably says a lot more about us than it does about the constituency. I don't expect them to come here. I expect us to go out there and start formulating that relationship to bridge the gap. Thank you.
Those were all the cards that I had. So can we have declaration of closed session items by our city attorney, please?
Thank you, Mayor Garcia. We have one item this evening for the City Council. It is anticipated litigation pursuant to Government Code 54956.9D2 and pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9E2. The facts and circumstances related to that are set forth on the agenda. To the extent there is reportable action, we will report it either at the conclusion of the closed session or immediately at the commencement of the 6 o'clock regular session.
Thank you. We will not recess to our closed session, and our regular session convenes at 6 p.m. Good evening. It is now 6 p.m. June 4th, 2019. And I call to order the regular meeting of the City Council of the City of Victorville. And the City Council sitting as the Library Board of Trustees, Southern California Logistics Rail Authority, Southern California Logistics Airport Authority, successor agency to the Victorville Redevelopment Agency, the Victorville Joint Powers Financing Authority, the Victorville Water District, and the city as housing as its successor. May we have roll call, please?
Councilmember Cox?
Here.
Councilmember Gomez?
Present.
Councilmember Jones?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Ramirez? Mayor Garcia?
Here. At this time, may we have closed session announcements by our city attorney, please?
Thank you, Mayor Garcia. We had only one closed session item this evening for the City Council. It was anticipated litigation pursuant to Government Code 54956.9D2 and pursuant to Government Code 54956.9E2. The facts and circumstances pertaining to that are fully set forth on the agenda. At this time, there is no reportable action with respect to that item.
Thank you. At this time, we will have the invocation, and it will be delivered by Pastor Gregory Winston of Life Church, and Pledge of Allegiance to be led by Police Chief Rick Bessinger. So please stand.
Let us pray. Our Heavenly Fathers, in the name of Jesus, we come to you thanking you, Lord, for protecting our city, the city of Victorville and the city around us, Lord. We thank you for giving Mayor Garcia and those who you put in position, Father God, to run your city, Father God, that they work together in unity, Father God, collaborating together, Father God, with the plans that you orchestrated here in Victorville County, Father God, in the San Bernardino County. We thank you for blessing our schools, Father God, our children that goes to school here in Victorville, Father God. We thank you for blessing our first responders, keeping them safe, for your will be done in the city, Father God. Lord, we thank you for your grace and your mercy, Father God, your everlasting love, Father God. Surround Victorville, Father God. And Lord, give them wisdom and knowledge and understanding of the plan to work together, Father God, because your will is being done here in Victorville. And we thank you, Father God. Thank you for keeping us safe. So let your will be done. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Pledge allegiance.
Flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
This evening, we do have a special presentation. I will be presenting awards to the 2019 Public Works Day ESA winners, and I will come down and do the presentations. Each year, we host about 315 fourth graders from the Victor Elementary School District for our Public Works Day. This event introduces these students to various city careers and shows them how our public works crews maintain our city's infrastructure and improve our quality of life. We ask the students to write essays about what they learned. Tonight, I have the honor of announcing the winners of our Public Works Essay Contest. To help me recognize these talented students, I'd like to invite Juan Robinson from our Public Works Division and Jeanette Ellis from the School District to come forward and join me. In third place, we have Teresa Bañuelos from Parkview. Congratulations, young lady. We are so proud of you. And again, congratulations to you, and continue doing good work.
Thank you.
Second place is Emma Teasdale from Green Tree East. Congratulations, Emma, and we are proud of you, and continue doing your wonderful work, and hopefully someday you will be working for the city, same as Emma, and we look forward to that day, okay? And first place winner of our Public Works Essay Contest is Maya Morales from Mojave Vista. And I'm sorry to say that she was unable to be here this evening. Is there anyone else that is picking up her certificate? Oh, you are, okay. Okay, very good. So now I guess we will have pictures. And at this time, we will have our city clerk present the agenda to council and any revisions to the agenda.
The Victorville City Council welcomes the public's participation in tonight's meeting. Anyone wishing to speak during public comment or on a particular item will be required to fill out a white speaker card located in the lobby and give it to the city clerk. The mayor will call upon each individual who has submitted a speaker card. Comments are to be limited to 3 minutes per individual or less as deemed necessary by the mayor. All communications are to be addressed directly to the City Council, not to the members of the audience. In accordance with state law, the City Council may not discuss or take action on any non-agenda items. The Council may receive testimony and set the matter to a subsequent meeting. Any person or group who interferes with the conduct of a City Council meeting by interrupting and/or disrupting the meeting is subject to removal. A peace officer may be requested to assist with removal should any person or group fail to comply with an order of removal by the presiding officer. Any person or group who resists removal by a peace officer is subject to arrest and prosecution. There is one revision, item B1 in front of you. A revision was made to the revenue amount for street lighting special assessments coding from $980,000 to $1,385,968. That's all I have, Mayor Garcia.
Thank you. Any item on this agenda that might be a conflict of interest to any council member or board member should be identified at this time.
I have a question. I guess this would go to the city attorney. I believe the issues have been resolved since the golf course is part of the overall city recreation program, which I certainly can discuss with the budget. But is that individual matter still a conflict?
I believe, given your location of your residence on the golf course, I'm going to advise you to recuse yourself with respect to the portion of the budget that just pertains to the golf course issues. So when we get to the public hearing, I'd like the council to sort of bifurcate the discussion, deal first with the golf course related issues, have you recuse yourself because of a possibility of a conflict, and then we'll come back and discuss the balance of the budget.
At this time, we do not have any appeal hearings. Therefore, we move on to public hearings. Item B1, a public hearing to hear arguments for and against adoption of the annual budget for fiscal year 2019-2020. At this time, do I recommend we...
I think it'd be appropriate for Keith. I think he's just going to give a very general overview of the budget, and then at that time I would have Mr. Cox step out when we discuss specifics related to the golf course.
Very well.
I have a question before Mr. starts. On the resolutions, there's not a separate item, so why is it a conflict?
I understand it's not a separate item. The problem is I would suggest that we take a minute order with respect to the golf course portion of the budget, just to err on the side of caution.
When you get to the point, let me know and I'll declare the conflict and step out. But
That would be appropriate.
Madam Mayor and members of the council, thank you, first of all, for allowing me to present to you this item of June 4th, 2019, which is your 2019-2020 fiscal budget. We have an obligation to plan the 1920 fiscal budget and have it adopted by June 30. We're ahead of schedule, and we're seeking your approval tonight of this budget. And getting to this point, it's been some time since we've gotten to this point. We've spent a considerable amount of effort. You had first seen a draft of this budget on May 14th, 2019, where we conducted a workshop and generally talked about this budget. There have been some changes to that draft since, and we'll call those changes out later in this presentation. But we concluded that meeting on May 14th asking for your feedback, especially as it related to policy-related matters on some of the discretionary spending items. We then again had an opportunity to chat with you briefly at the May 21st meeting, asking for continued feedback with respect to the budget. We have taken all of your comments and feedback and brought it forward in this budget that is for consideration. And it's at this point that I do want to thank you as the council for your assistance, your guidance, your comment, and your support in trusting staff to bring this budget to you. I also want to thank the executive team, which comprises myself, of course, Deputy City Manager George Harris, and also Deputy City Manager Sophie Smith, for their leadership in guiding the leadership team, which I also must thank because this budget does not get done by 2 or 3 people. It's a big team effort. Everybody in the leadership team, which you have in front of you, all of the various department heads, division heads, have helped guide in preparing this document. But then also I'd like to particularly recognize 2 staff members from the finance department, if they'd stand up, Ms. Kim Scott and Ms. Christina Burgess, who are on the finance floor, taking all of the input and feedback from the executives, from the leadership in actually helping assemble this document. So thank you very much, and thank you to the leadership team and the executive team. We have an agenda for you, and this kind of highlights what I intend to discuss with you. And similar to the budget presentation we did last year, we intend to keep this very high level, focusing on the general nature of the budget, including your special funds and your enterprise funds. But one of the things that we did include this year is a vision, which we'll talk about. And we're also going to identify particularly the changes since the last meeting. We have an opportunity to talk about some of the organizational elements of this budget. And a little bit different this year than last year is we're going to conclude and try to bring some attention to the future outlook of your general fund. Staff has been pleased in the current fiscal budget how we ended. We're actually pleased in how we closed out the books from the previous fiscal year, and we're actually looking forward to this fiscal year because we have been successfully improving our cash position when it comes to general fund reserves. But as we are excited about the past and this current budget that you're about to approve, we want to be cautiously optimistic about future years, certainly as we hear and talk more about the increased demands for our public services. But with that, the vision for this budget really started with an effort from the leadership team. The leadership team started convening back in September of last year and then again in December. And we started assembling to try to figure out how we were going to shape this organization going forward, recognizing the issues of the past and certainly recognizing the opportunities for the future. And your leadership team identified a number of goals, all of which are shaping how we've prepared this budget document. But with that, some of those focuses have been improving and expanding our customer service experience, really focusing on reducing the negative public perception that the public will have just generally of any local government. Our goal is to do things at the administrative levels to try to overcome that and improve that, become more fiscally sustainable. And with that, with those goals that the leadership team had started assembling, is really kind of what shapes the vision that we've put here in front of you. Number one being reconnecting with the customers, which are your residents, increasing the productivity, the efficiency and effectiveness, improving our general fund reserves, and looking at the future goals and objectives of the council, all of which you'll find thematic throughout this presentation before you. So with that, starting out with the budget overview at the high level perspective, what you're looking at in this binder before you is a compilation of 81 funds, and we've asked you to start thinking about the organization as 81 funds or 81 different business enterprises, because each of the funds that we are responsible for managing, they all have different requirements, different elements to which you can generate and spend money. But with that, in the collective 81 funds, what this chart shows you is that you've got a revenue budget of $215.5 million. You've got an expense budget of $217.5 million. That suggests a $2 million deficit. However, that $2 million deficit is what we rely on cash reserves for, and you'll actually see later in this presentation, especially as we look at some of the particular funds, you'll actually see where we deficit spend in certain funds but rely on cash balance, unrestricted fund balance is what finance calls it, and we actually rely on that. It's effectively your savings to carry you through years to pay for things such as capital. But of that $217.5 million, capital in itself, included in that number, is $19.7 million. This is kind of a breakdown on this chart as to how the $217.5 million is arrived at. You'll see the difference between the general fund and the enterprise funds. Examples of some of your enterprise funds include the Airport Authority and the Water District. The general fund, as you know, is the fund that you have the most absolute discretionary authority over, and that's the fund that's going to rely on your sale, that's going to generate your sales tax and property tax, but is also going to fund your police and fire, your public safety objectives. And breaking down a little bit more detailed, we've got a general fund summary here, and what we've attempted to do is compare where we were May 14th versus where we're at today to just illustrate a little bit better the changes. The changes between the first draft and what you have here today haven't changed dramatically, but you'll see in the first column, the budget workshop column, that was May 14th, you'll actually see and probably recognize that $1,869,408 number. And when we presented that number to you, we presented it in two formats. We identified $1 million that staff was recommending using of that surplus to actually be deposited into your reserve, general fund reserve fund, so that you can improve your cash position and get closer to meeting your reserve target, which is 15%. But also in that $1.86 million number, there was a number of improvements, and this is what we really were recommending and identifying for the council. This was where you had discretion in terms of setting policy and spending that money. And with the feedback that we got from you, we've modified that slightly. But what you'll find when you shift from that column of May 14th, the budget workshop column, to the proposed budget today, you'll see a difference in that surplus number going from 1.86 to 1.015. And so what we've done, just to illustrate the difference, is we've taken effectively the $869,000. Doesn't work out exactly that amount because there's been some changes along the way. But we've taken that discretionary amount. We've taken the recommended projects that were recommended at that meeting. We've actually considered your comments and added a few of those projects in. And where that $869,000 actually goes is into the 63.93. So we've actually programmed them now as expenditures, and that's part of the recommendation going forward. And so effectively what you do see in your general fund that we're budgeting is 1.015, or just over $1 million, effectively to be deposited to your general fund reserve to help bolster your general fund position and improving your general fund target. I think it's important to note, and I just want to call attention, because I think this will resonate a little bit later in the presentation, that of your general fund, your sales tax and property tax combined, total revenue, 62% of your general fund revenue is derived from sales and property tax. In comparison, your public safety cost, that's your police and fire cost, is 63% of your general fund revenue. And I wanted to call that to your attention because those are both very big chunks that are representing your general fund. And one of the trends that we're seeing, and we'll illustrate later, is that as public safety costs are increasing, they're increasing at an outpace to your sales and property tax revenues, and that's a future outlook that we'll want to raise caution to later in the presentation. So this next slide, excuse me, calls to attention the noteworthy changes since our budget workshop. And one of the things that we identified, and it looks like a big number, the $200,000, and you need to note that there's revenue and expenses, so we actually increased revenue by $200,000, but we also increased expense by $200,000. And one of the things that we identified as a part of the transition that will be better reported, I believe, at the next council meeting when we have the fire transition report before you. I know we intended to do it today, but we're putting the final touches on it. One of the things that we identified is for the state-mandated inspections, County Fire was not actually charging for those inspections as they were required to under the contract. So one thing that's certainly going to be different in how we operate the fire department and as we're rolling out the Fire Prevention Bureau is that we will be charging for the mandated inspections, and we'll also be rolling out a program where we're charging for just the required prevention inspections for all commercial vehicles. So we did alter the budget to reflect the revenues in and the expense out. We'll largely be relying on contract services for the prevention inspection program. We did identify a supplemental support need for the fire prevention customer service. That would be a part-time employee to help us get the program started. We did identify, it was an omission, it was an oversight, but the council had directed staff to budget money for goal setting and a governance relation consultant. So we programmed that money back in. We've got leadership goal setting workshops. One of the things that responds to our reconnecting with the community, but also is directly responsive to comments we were hearing from the council, is community events. So we'll be bringing back movies in the park. This will be in addition to the community pop-ups that we've been talking about, where we're going to actually be doing more targeted community pop-ups, where we're going to have barbecue and certain types of events in neighborhood parks as an opportunity to reconnect with residents of particular neighborhoods. And then with that, we had some minor changes on the organizational side. One of the things that you'll find is we had to realign some of the leadership team ranges, because with the recommended change in eliminating the furlough, there was becoming some organizational issues with respect to compaction of the ranges. So as the ranges of 57 and below were enjoying the 10% increase because of the furlough reduction, there started to become compaction where there was overlap into the leadership ranks. So that's one thing that we'll speak about a little bit later and call attention to that. Other noteworthy changes, one of the items is the police traffic technology improvements. The council did have a good comment at the last meeting with respect to what that is. Maybe that was 2 meetings ago. And so with that baked into this presentation, you'll hear from Lieutenant John Wickham. We've got a brief presentation as to what that technology is. Altogether, it's intended to be a program, a technology that helps make the police more effective and efficient in solving crimes. We've left in the remodel of the restroom for the police department, and then from everything below that, those are carryovers from the staff-developed recommendations at the May 14th meeting. Those include a variety of facility improvements throughout the city, including some of your parks. So some of the budget assumptions that are notable and thematic throughout this presentation is still the revenues assumed are flat, particularly in your general fund. Property tax, I think we projected at 1%, and I think we kept sales tax altogether flat. And so that was one major assumption. Another that's in this presentation is that the furloughs end. Originally in the presentation it says June 30, and that was what we were intending at our last budget workshop, but we identified that implementing the furlough elimination July 1st is a little bit problematic because there's already a pay period started. So what we're actually recommending is that the furloughs will end effectively July 12th of this fiscal year, the upcoming fiscal year. Position eliminations, we identified a number of vacant positions that were not necessary, and so there was a number of position eliminations. I think important to the enterprise, and we call this out so that you're aware, in the water enterprise, you operate based upon a cost of service study that's been approved by this council. We're in year 4 of year 5, and we're actually undertaking a new cost of service study to support the rates for the water district for basically in 2 years we have to have it in place. But the current rate plan establishes a rate increase of 6.25%, so this budget is recommending carrying that forward. The adopted sewer rate plan, similarly, you got a cost of service study. We're in year 2 of that 5-year plan. That includes a 15% rate increase, and that does not include any pass-through treatment costs that may be passed through by, or adopted, by VVWRA, which is the Wastewater Reclamation Authority. And then the solid waste rate study of 3.9%. That was a study that we approved last year. We're now in year 2 of the 5-year plan, and you've got a 3.9% increase to the rates there. And then finally, and we've touched on this, but that is an expectation that we'll, relying on the repayment of the VMUS loan to the general fund, by the end of the year you should expect to be able to deposit to your general fund reserve an additional $1 million. This chart is something similar to what we shared with you at the budget workshop, but this chart is intended to show you kind of the trend that we've been operating under since June 30 of 2016, including some actuals and some projected numbers. But in that June 30, 2016 year, comparing that forward to the projected June 30, 2020 number, your general fund target increases from 59% to 90% is what we're projecting to be at by the end of the year. So that's a measure of your health. I think, in fact, we're very pleased as staff to be able to present to you that we're able to make these recommendations. This effectively is your rainy day fund, if you wanted to characterize it that way. So we're going to go on to enter some of the enterprise funds and special funds. As we mentioned, there's 81 of these funds. I wanted to call to attention the water funds, and we've listed the various funds that make up the water funds, and we've related them to pages 137 through 139. We've already called to attention the rate increase that's required. One of the things that I did want to highlight, of course, is that in this particular case, you're showing a deficit spend. So you're showing total revenues being $42.2 million. You're showing water expenditures being $44 million, which gives you a deficit about $1.8 million. For your benefit and for the benefit of the public, what we did on the left side of that chart is show you effectively the cash positions, in this case of the water. So when you deficit spend, we certainly want to identify the sufficiency of cash to be able to handle that. And being that this is a rate planned enterprise, your rate plans contemplate these ebbs and flows where you're actually putting more money in and then in some years taking more money out. But this fund is, I would argue, is probably one of the healthiest of funds that you govern, in that you've got operating reserves established, you've got capital reserves established, certainly you've got debt reserves, and you certainly have money available to match your OPEB liabilities. So this one I would characterize certainly as your healthiest of funds. You've got the Southern California Logistics Airport which relates on page 134. In this particular case, you're looking at a variety of the revenue sources against a variety of expenditures, and you're looking at a $30.8 million revenue side to a $29.5 expenditure side. That's actually showing a surplus in this particular case. And so what that's indicating is that conditions at the airport are improving. And if you'll recall from the budget workshop, certainly we shared with you a number of the different tenancies that have taken place and taken root at the airport. Things are looking up at the airport. Certainly this is a better picture than we've seen for a few years. Victorville Municipal Utility Services. This correlates to pages 125, 127, and 136. And important here to recognize is that this is the utility service out at the Foxborough Industrial Park and out at the airport, and this is a utility service that you govern. Its customers are only industrial customers. You don't have any residential customers. And so in this particular case, you sell electricity and you sell natural gas. And what you'll find here is a surplus in the total operations. One thing that I will call your attention to, because you will see something likely in July, is that on the electric operations side, I did advise you previously that because of commodity price increases in the marketplace, we were able to procure a couple years ago energy costs at a very low rate. The market has changed dramatically over the last couple years. Natural gas prices are a major indicator when it comes to the purchase of electricity. And with that, natural gas prices being high, we had to lock in within the last 30 days power for the next 2 years, and we actually locked in the commodity price at 62% greater than our prior commodity price. Now, that's not the total cost of the power. There's 3 components to the cost of power. Commodity is one, but you've got transmission and distribution. So it won't be a direct 62% increase passed through to the customers, but there will be an increase. I wanted to call that to your attention. This budget does contemplate at least recovering the cost increase associated with the commodity, and we'll formalize the rate study in July as our expected time frame. A large part of the delay has been our waiting to have locked in prices. We are watching the market to see if we can get a better commodity price, but then also we index our rates off of the TOU 8 tariff schedule that SoCal Edison adopts, and Edison had just recently adopted a new tariff, so we're actually having to make sure that as we set our rates, we're setting them consistent with the newly adopted SoCal Edison rates. So that's something that you will, and I don't want you to be surprised by it, but you will see rate setting likely occurring in
I have
July.
a question. Who are we securing the electricity from? South? Did you say SoCal Edison? Or are you talking about electricity, right?
The commodity that we purchase from is Shell Energy. That is our provider of energy. We have an energy contract with them, and they distribute it to the grid, and then we take delivery from the CalISO grid. The next slide that you have is the sanitary fund, which relates to page 132. And we talked about this a little bit earlier. You've got a rate plan that requires a rate increase of 15%. We're in year 2. You're going to see the forward years actually not be as high in terms of the rate increase. You'll recall when we adopted this rate plan last year, this was after many years of not having adopted a rate plan, so there was a lot of catch-up to be done in years 1 and 2. This is year 2. But effectively what you're seeing here is a deficiency in the revenues versus expenditure, but you'll also see that there is an available fund balance of $8.2 million to help offset that deficit spend. Then finally, you've got solid waste. This is one that we did. In fact, we're grateful that the council last year approved the rate plan. This was another one of those enterprises that had not had an adopted rate plan for many, many years, causing this fund to be a fund of great concern to us until you approved the last rate plan. Before the fiscal year started and before the last rate plan was approved, this was a fund that we actually envisioned possibly running out of cash by the end of the last calendar year, but with this rate plan, it's actually helped us keep this fund on its feet. And you'll actually find that at the bottom, with the surplus in revenues exceeding expenditures, you'll need those revenues to help prop up the available resources so that you can use those in forward years to satisfy the 5-year plan. Streetlight Fund, page 150, and
Before you move, what index did you adopt, LA or San Bernardino counties?
I'm sorry, can you restate your question?
What index did you adopt? Was it from LA County or was it from San Bernardino County?
Yeah, I think your question is more so related to measure of COLA, which we're not dealing with a COLA here. We're actually talking about the rate plan increase.
Right, and we always have to model over someone else how we're going to charge the rate based on how someone else, for this is solid waste, right? I'm thinking trash, I'm thinking right?
So the rate plan is indexed off of an actual study of cost to deliver services.
That in LA or San Bernardino, do you
That
remember?
was local. That's here. Our costs.
We're not modeling after the county of San Bernardino or LA.
No, this is based upon a local cost of service study. Streetlight fund, and I believe the corrected version is what has been handed out, and that's the version that these numbers tie into. And with that, you've got a revenue of $2 million, expenditure of 2.5, with a deficit spend of $502,000, relying on available fund balance to project still cash available at the end of the fiscal year of $470,000. Large part has been the increasing expenditures that we've seen on the capital side. And then storm drain fund. This is a fund of, this is an area of concern for staff. In fact, as a part of this budget, staff is recommending that we proceed in authorizing a cost of service study to be done. This is a fund that has not had a revenue, a fee increase, since we probably first originally adopted the fee back in the 80s, I'm guessing. It's been a very, very long time. So the revenues generated certainly are lacking, or certainly not tracking what the needs of the system are. So with that, we're at least making the fund work for this year. It's a very lean fund. Doesn't have a significant amount of capital considering the nature of the storm drain system running through your town. But that's something that we want to develop as a rate plan so that we can actually start planning better for the capital needs to improve the storm drain system throughout the city.
And I have a question for the street lighting fund. Is that based on the 5 priorities that we've been working on? One being Old Town?
Yes, this is the fund that does consider those priorities, and this is the fund that's used to meet those priorities.
Thank you.
As to the organizational side, wanted to talk with you about some of the organizational elements of this budget. The org chart is laid out before you, which doesn't have any real dramatic change over the previous one that you've seen. The next slide is intended to illustrate your total number of full-time employees. And I think worth noting is from the 17-18 fiscal year actuals to what's proposed 19-20, you're seeing a slight downward trend. A large part of that is attributed to positions that are eliminated, that have been vacant and determined no longer necessary. But this slide also, the 548, is intended to suggest your purchasing of power, your reach in terms of total employees, direct and indirect, through your contract with the county sheriff. The next slide summarizes the changes since our last presentation. And the only thing I think really worth noting is different is we did identify a couple of amended or class changes. That is new, which is the second element in the slide. We did identify a need to reclass a particular position in environmental services, which is overseen by community services. And then also we wanted to bring parity with other supervisors, the utility distribution supervisor position. But with that, we've also, those are the same FTE position deletions that you saw at the budget workshop. And next slide is...
I have a question for that slide. Did any of these positions that were altered, were they any 58 or up step-ups?
The environmental program specialist to the environmental program coordinator, yes. I don't remember the actual step, but there was a, Janelle, do you know? There was a change to 43 from a 37. And what we evaluated, especially with some realignment of field crew, out of the code side, I think it was out of the development side of the building, into the community services. This position particularly was identified as needing to supervise employees. In that previous job description, the specialist did not provide for it, so we actually had to do a reclass so that the position could properly deal with the supervision of field crew employees. So at the last workshop, we did share with you that the budget and one of the major assumptions was to eliminate the furlough. We did apply that to all employees going back to a 40-hour work week from the 36-hour work week. And we've also instituted the 10% increase for non-leadership positions to be immediate, and that'll be applied effective July 13th, which is the start of the new work week. One of the things that we calculated to give a sense of the increased productivity that we're envisioning achieving from this is we calculated the number of hours that 4-hour work week represents, and that's almost 75,000 hours that should be realized by the city in terms of
Sorry,
work.
Keith, I'm getting confused with July 12th, now July 13th, and now over here we have July 15th. Maybe you're just describing different means of doing this.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I have here in my notes the new work week is actually to start on July 13th, which means the previous work week ends on July 12th, and eventually you'll see a date on the next slide of July 15th, which is the actual Monday, because the work week is not starting on the Monday for pay purposes. So you'll see really the effective date to where the employees will be starting to work. The 40-hour work week will be July 13th. City Hall will see that change July 15th, which is the Monday. One thing that we did do that we did not talk about is because of the compaction, but also because as we were rolling this out, I was hearing concerns amongst the leadership team that notwithstanding their willingness to be a part of this program and share in some of the pain, but also in supporting the non-leadership positions, I was hearing, and I value those concerns. The concern was that the leadership group would not ever see the 10% increase. So what we did do to address that, really just to address that and provide an opportunity for them to realize the 10%, we actually recommended adjusting the pay ranges, basically 4 ranges, so that leadership has the opportunity to earn that 10% over the course of the next couple years. And effectively where you'll see the benefit of that is it gives certainly those that have topped out on their scale an opportunity to earn more, so their earnings can increase by the 10%, and certainly for those that maybe are in the middle of their scale, they'll actually have additional years to which they can continue to see their earnings rise. So this is a mechanism to eventually get the leadership team on par with enjoying that 10%.
Is that immediate? Is there it's called a pay class increase that's going to be frozen for a year or two? I don't know if that's immediate. What's going on with that?
So as to the leadership team, the leadership team is not enjoying in the 10% in the upcoming fiscal year. The way this is being rolled out, and I believe it's later in the resolution approving your salary schedule, they will be eligible for it after they complete this fiscal year. And the way it's intended to work is for all of the leadership team will complete their evaluations for the past year worked, and after they complete their evaluation period in this upcoming fiscal year, they would then be eligible for a new anniversary date starting July 1st, 2020. And that's when they would be eligible for to participate in the increased the increased ranges. And then finally, there's no changes for the deputy city managers, myself, the fire chief, and the fire staff, as the fire staff was brought on board with a traditional work week for the fire service.
With your explanation, is that class 57 to 64, which includes yours and also the fire department in 2020 July?
I'm sorry, can you restate that question, please?
Yes. That's going to be including July 1st, 2020 class 58 to 64, which would include your pay and then also the fire department. Is that correct?
58 to 64 is leadership. It's not executive, nor is it the fire chief. So with that, the recommendation carrying forward would be effective July 15th here at City Hall. The work schedule that we're proposing, and this would open City Hall back up to 5 days a week. Our work schedule for the employees, our work day would be defined as 7:30 to 5:30 Monday through Thursday, 7:30 to 4:30 on Fridays, those Fridays that are worked. And what we'll end up doing is have what we're calling a 980 split shift. So there'll effectively be an A shift and a B shift so that we can keep City Hall open the 5 days to be more accessible to the public. And with that, we're going to have slightly different operating hours here at City Hall. One of the thought processes with that was to try to improve a little bit of the efficiency of the employee, believing that half hour before and half hour after City Hall opens, just having that non-interrupted time, if you will, may give the employees a little bit more time to follow up on emails or phone calls or what have you, that's unobstructed by some of the things that really consume the daily workday, which is meetings and counter calls and things of that nature. So what we're proposing in the City Hall case is that the operating hours for City Hall Monday through Thursday would be 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. and then on Friday 8 a.m. to 4 p.m.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I need clarification. You changed the times. I know you said half an hour before and half an hour later would give them time, which means that half an hour the city hall would be closed, but they would still get paid for those times and you would have an AP shift. Is that what you said?
To be clear, the operating hours of City Hall will be 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and the work schedule for the employees will start at 7:30 a.m. and end at 5:30 p.m. on those same days. So we'll start before City Hall opens, and our workday will end after City Hall opens. I'm sorry, City Hall closes.
Same for Friday, right?
Same concept for Friday.
Okay.
On the fringe benefit side, and you'll see this in the resolution dealing with salary and benefits, we did have to add back a holiday. This actually reverts us back to the pre-furlough days. So instead of 12 holidays, we'll have 13 holidays, and that one holiday that gets added is the day after Thanksgiving. In the furlough time period, we didn't necessarily need the Friday after Thanksgiving as a holiday because that was a natural day off at that point in time. We're also adjusting the sick leave accruals to reflect what was in place when we had a 40-hour work week before the furloughs, when the furloughs were instituted. That 96 hours of sick leave accrual was actually reduced by 10% as well, so we're proposing to reinstitute that back in so that the accrual for sick will be 96 hours per year. We did add one additional day off to the Christmas holiday break so that we have that similarly natured extended time period during Christmas and New Year's to where we are not requiring the employee to come back one day in between the two holidays That way it's just a closure altogether from Christmas Eve all the way through to the day after January 1st. And then this is a correction. The very last bullet dealing with paid time off does not credit towards the calculation of overtime. I think the easiest way to explain this is, and it's a correction that we're making. We already made the correction as it related to the rollout of the fire personnel rules. But the way our current rules exist, and it's necessary that we change it, is if we use an example of taking a day off for vacation during a work week, and let's say that vacation day is 8 hours. The way our rules currently read is that those 8 hours actually get counted towards the calculation of your work week. So if you come in the remaining days of the week and the accumulation of those hours is 42 hours or 43 hours, including that day off, that's the problem that we're correcting, is that the vacation day should not count towards the work calculation that factors into overtime. So that's a correction that we're going to make, so that the calculation of overtime is based solely upon hours worked.
Before you move on, you didn't provide a figure or a percentage in terms of July 2020, what that would cost. I mean, we're probably going to have a budget review, but if we're already planning for it, I think we should have at least a percentage. We're already taking them away from our general reserves, so I don't know how that's going to work.
I'm not sure I totally understand the question, especially as it related to taking away from general fund reserves, because this budget is actually putting money into your general fund reserves.
So it's pertinent to the furlough removals. So how did you anticipate the dollar amount or the percentage cost for July 2020 leadership's adjustment, since we didn't discuss that during our budget review?
The leadership element will not hit in this fiscal year. So
Right, but you've already anticipated that we're going to have enough revenues to be able to sustain how many employees with how many. I mean, I'm looking at a figure dollar right now, and I'm sure you forecasted it already in order to be able to implement that, because there's no pay freeze.
Yeah, I think it's more a question as to have we projected it for the 2021, and so we have forecasted to the extent we can. As it relates to leadership, we don't expect it necessarily to be a huge number, because we're dealing with probably 16 or 17 employees, many of which are charged to a variety of different special funds, so probably the significance to the general fund isn't that great. We're getting closer to the end here. The CIP projects, these are some highlights. Not much change since what you saw in the budget workshop, but you've got a variety of street, sewer, and water improvements, many of which are they're all of which in the capital improvement plan, and in the case of sewer and water, those are rate planned improvements. Got some additional, you've got animal control improvements, you've got some community service needs, and you also have some fire needs. As it relates to fire, you've got 2 engines on order that, Chief, correct me if I'm wrong, my understanding is they're being manufactured as we speak, but as those engines are completed and delivered to the city, we have 2 engines that are currently frontliners. Their active service right now. We'll actually pull those back when the new engines come in, and then we'll work towards refurbishing the 2 engines that we pull off the front line so that they can serve as reserve units going forward. We've got some technology improvements as well to better enhance the notification system in our stations and tie into the Confire dispatch center, and then some miscellaneous equipment for the fire department. At this point, one of the things that I did want to do, and I'm going to turn it over to Lieutenant John Wickham, but one of the items that we identified earlier, the $450,000 for technology improvements related to the police department, that technology improvement that we're recommending to you is an automatic license plate recognition program. ALPR is the acronym that's commonly used. But I wanted to turn it over at this point to Lieutenant Wickham, and he can share with you what this technology is about.
Madam Mayor, Council, thank you. Like the city manager was talking about, the ALPR is the automatic license plate reader system. And I believe that you have before you a handout that talks about this technology. Captain Bessinger and I are always looking for innovative ways to improve our law enforcement mission. And this technology is a way that we could protect the citizens of our community and help our law enforcement mission. Up on the screen is an example of cameras within an intersection that, as you can see, that are attached to, in this case, the traffic light signal. They're placed at strategic locations throughout the community. So with the fixed point license plate cameras, this allows us as law enforcement to proactively prevent crime and improve the security and safety of our citizens. It adds an investigative power and enhances the safety without increasing manpower, which is good for us. And technology, without adding personnel, we can improve our efficiency and better deployment of our resources, and especially our deputy sheriffs. Strategically positioned cameras at locations throughout the city will provide valuable information to safeguard lives. Again, these cameras can be mounted on signs, street lights, highway overpasses. The software can identify that license plate, and it translates it to a database that's compared to millions of vehicles out there, and especially vehicles of interest. And we'll get to that in a minute. Basically, if the system will match maybe a wanted vehicle or a vehicle of interest and let deputies or officers know immediately on the streets that there's somebody in town that we need to probably investigate. So how can the ALPRs be used? With proactive policing, it identifies wanted vehicles. It could be kidnapping victims where we've identified a vehicle and that license plate's been entered in the system. Let's say it comes into Victorville, that camera is going to pick that up and alert us immediately. Known criminals, violent offenders. Now, when we talk about in-progress calls, robbery, shootings, critical missings, this technology is very critical in the event, because, you know, if you look at Victorville, we have the I-15 that basically runs right through the city. And oftentimes in my career, I've seen where, you know, these vehicles will come through town, exit, maybe do a bank robbery. These cameras can capture information that can expedite the investigation, if you will. In other words, we can enter data into the program that will filter out maybe the color of the vehicle, maybe a partial license plate that a witness, you know, acquired, and help us identify and locate and solve that crime. And as far as even in reactive, you know, unfortunately, God forbid, murders, you know, burglaries, sex offenders, rapes, there's just a long list of things that this technology can aid us with. And moving on to the database entries, for example, across the country, we've all seen the Boston bomber, the sniper, you know, shooters throughout the country, where if we identify who these suspects are, they place a license plate into the system and they come into our city, we're going to get alerted right away. Moving on to the LPR system, basically it's the capturing of license plates, and it translates to wanted vehicles and persons of interest or vehicles of interest. This next slide gives you kind of an idea of what it looks like when the camera takes a picture of a vehicle. You can see that it looks like it's a, you know, white Honda and maybe a partial license plate, if not the whole license plate. If a vehicle's stolen, in this case it's stolen, it alerts us right away, and we can apprehend those persons that are usually responsible for additional crimes, and especially traffic violations. The next slide, that's just an overview of just additional license plate and how it captures it. ALPR systems currently in use in San Bernardino County. As you can see, Central, Grand Terrace, Chino Hills, Highland. Anymore, this has been around for quite some time now. Most of our freeways, anywhere you drive, generally you're going to be captured on this system. And at a conclusion, over 50% of crime associated with the vehicle. It's a one-time capital improvement versus ongoing costs of additional officers. And as leaders in law enforcement industry, we must pursue innovative ways to enhance public safety. And it's a true force multiplier with minimal impact on our staff. And again, just redeploying our resources more efficiently.
So I have questions, 2 questions regarding what you explained. You didn't say red light cameras.
No, ma'am, this is not a red light camera.
I want to make sure. I didn't hear that, but you never know. The other thing is, are you going to use the ALPR system to enforce any type of immigration to connect with Homeland Security?
No, ma'am.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
No, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Mayor and members of the council, as it relates to the ALPR, first I want to thank you for allowing me to work with the Sheriff's Office to at least explore what's out there. And the reason why I'm saying thank you is because it's so common sitting in this chair, sitting in this position, to hear from a council, whether it's in this city or any other city, council saying we just need to hire more sheriff. And as much as we like to do it, and the next slide will allude to it, there's some realities that we're having to deal with, and that is just the rising costs and the lack of rising revenue. But in this particular case, it gave us an opportunity, and this is a theme throughout our organization, not just with the Sheriff's Department, is we were able to see this and view this as a technology that can be more useful to the sheriff to make them more effective and more efficient in solving crimes faster, as opposed to having some crimes linger and delay for longer periods of time, to where perhaps those crimes are not getting solved because there's a new emergency to deal with that moment. So we think it's a tool that's going to be hugely valuable to solving crimes quicker and being able to get focused on the next one. And it's our goal, before we start recommending, not just with the Sheriff's Department, but even in this organization with staff, before we start recommending more personnel for increased services, it's our goal and it's our view, and it's our view in this budget presentation, to make sure that we as an organization, whether it's sheriff or the city staff, that we're doing the job most effectively, most efficiently as possible, to the point where if the council is asking for something more from us, we're able to say we're doing everything we possibly can with the resources that we got, and with that to help better justify the need for increased resources if the request down the road is for increased services. So that brings us to the concluding slide, and this is the caution, despite the fact that we're in a good year. Last year was a good year. We're closing out another fiscal year that's good in terms of supplementing our cash position. We're projecting this upcoming fiscal year to be a good year where we're improving your reserves. But I do want you to be aware of what's ahead, and that's, again, speaking to just the fundamental nature that expenses are outpacing your revenue, especially your general fund sales and property tax. And what this slide shows is a divergence to where over the course of the next fiscal year, you'll actually see the expenses start outpacing to where expenses exceed the projected general fund revenues. Really what that's telling you, unless something magical happens, unless there's an amazing change in what's happening in terms of discretionary sales, or unless you see some dramatic changes in property tax values that are going to generate more property taxes, this is telling you that there's some type of supplemental revenue source likely needed. And that's a conversation that I want to start having with you soon, because we're hearing, and we've heard it quite loudly over the last year, that there is an increased sense of demand for our services. We've heard about an increased demand for public safety. We've started hearing demand for increased parks and recreational services. We've been hearing demand for improved library services. We've got a homelessness issue that we've got to address that we're not designed to address in terms of the revenue structure that cities are afforded. And we hear for increased code enforcement to supplement the law enforcement side of the house. So what I'm telling you is we're hearing it, and as we're hearing those increased demands for services, we have no doubt that the residents deserve a higher level of service. The issue is going to be how do we afford it going forward. So this slide is really intended to kind of give you that future outlook, and that's why the vision that we've put and baked into this presentation for you really focus heavily on getting reconnected with the public, re-engaging with them, because we believe the more and more we can not only connect with them, but share what we do and communicate how a city is run and how we can provide additional services, just given the additional support, we can provide the residents whatever it is they want with the right revenue sources. So with that, this is a conversation we'll have going into the future. Finally, the next steps for us is to conduct the public hearing, and it's staff's recommendation that the budget as presented with the revisions be approved by the City Council.
You know,
Thank
I
you.
have a question. I'm sorry.
So, and I have questions as well, Madam Mayor.
Jim, go ahead.
I did not want to interrupt the presentation of the staff, but I do have some questions. Are we going to have the opportunity?
What I would recommend at this point is that, Mr. Cox, you recuse yourself. We have a discussion on just those portions of the budget pertaining to the golf course, which are very limited. Have the public hearing on that, take a minute order with respect to approval of that, then have Jim come in and ask questions on the general budget, if that's okay with you.
I appreciate that. These aren't. I'd like to ask these questions before you go into the public hearing. Naturally, on that I'll have questions. I didn't want to interrupt.
As long as they're not related to the golf course, that would be
Not
fine.
related to the golf course at all.
And Madam Mayor and members of the council, executive team and leadership is here in the audience, so any detailed questions you have, I'll do my best to answer them, but I'll certainly bring up appropriate staff.
So then am I to understand that we're going to deal with the golf course issue secondarily?
I would like to do that first, actually, just to get that out of the way. That's how the FPPC likes you to handle the segregated item first, and then have general questions on the rest of the budget after that. You know, if that's okay with you, it'd be beneficial right now for you to recuse yourself. We just have a discussion on those portions of the budget. If any council members have questions about the budgetary items pertaining specifically to the golf course, we should consider those right now.
Well, I understand what you're doing. I don't disagree, except that we just had a presentation of the budget. Has nothing to do with the golf course. I have questions
That's your question.
in regard to the presentation
Yeah.
that just made. Thank you. In regard to the public safety, you indicated that sales tax and the property taxes that the city receive is equivalent or equal to, just about equal to the expenditures of the fire, police, or public safety. What percentage of the general fund, the income is made up of sales and property tax?
The sales and property tax component is about 62%.
The reason that I asked the question, and I kind of knew what the answer was, is because fire and police will go up by the very nature of the service, and you predict that income will be the same, which means we need to have a revenue plan starting fairly immediately for the next 5 years, because if not, you will be reducing services someplace else to find the money to meet the cost next year for the 2021 budget. I think that's just a given. Also, we have a debt service in regard to bonds that's been issued, and one of the requirements, we are now up to date. We are no longer in arrears, but there is a requirement to have an amount of money in each one of those funds. I think it's a 6-month pay. It's considered a reserve by some people, but it's not called a reserve in the bond world. Has that been met, and do we have any makeup for those funds that are on outstanding debts?
Our debt service reserve fund requirements are all met. They're all satisfied.
You indicated that 58 to 64 is not executive nor the fire chief.
You have 30 seconds.
That's all. I have others.
Council could, if you wanted to, provide more, take a
It's
motion,
okay.
provide more time.
These
more
are
time.
kind of technical questions from staff, and I don't think it's going to affect the budget hearing. And I'm just
Well, I'll
concerned
make that motion to give him more time.
Well, and I think I'd like to do that because Councilmember Gomez was asking many questions during the course of it, and I think we should all have an opportunity to have a little more time. So the normal questioning time is 2 minutes for questions of staff. So
I just have one more question. If that's
well, I know mine is going to take more than 2 minutes.
That's correct. It's up to the council if you want to make a motion and say maybe 3 minutes, 5 minutes.
Go ahead, Jim. Ask your question.
I think the council has to vote.
So, Madam Mayor, may I make a motion then that we extend the time period for the questioning of the staff for the purposes of the budget only to 3 minutes rather than 2?
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion made by Councilmember Jones, seconded by Councilmember Gomez. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
One of the things that was pointed out is we may have to look for the last slide points out that we need to look at this financial plan. We need to discuss the possibility of another swimming pool. We need to discuss the possibility of a branch library that is not included in the budgets. These things are coming up, and therefore this budget looks great, but unless we put into effect either a reduction in the cost of services, which I don't think we can do, or taxes, sales tax and property taxes go up, which they should a little bit because of the new businesses, there's going to be a need for a new revenue source to accomplish the things that the general public is now requesting and expects us to provide. We can, although we're in good financial shape now, it cannot be done under the current financing of the city. I just wanted to make that comment, and thank you very much. It's a great presentation.
Madam Mayor, if I might address that, and speaking to the library, and I very much apologize, and that was a very important part of the changes, noteworthy changes, I should say, in effect. We did budget money for a library services study. We budgeted an amount of about $50,000. We budgeted $50,000 to do that study, and that's to really attempt to start getting us started, if you will, in moving us towards getting some recommendations as to what our library system should look like. I do appreciate your comments as to needing to start rate planning going forward. We put this money in there believing that we will get to that point, and I look forward to working with you to get to that point where we have a rate plan and a financial plan to generate the revenues necessary to expand the library service. But I did want to call attention to that particularly because not only has it been brought up at the last council meeting, we've heard this for years now. And so it's recognizing the issues of the past, the comments of the past. We just haven't had the resources to get there.
I think, Jim, it'd be okay if you stay if there are other general questions. They're general questions as long as they're not related to the golf course.
Mine, the questions that I'll ask now aren't related to the golf course at all. Thank you. May I, Madam Mayor? Thank you, please. All right, so my first questions are going to be on the PowerPoint. If we look at the pie chart in the budget overview section, and this is mainly for the benefit of those who didn't or weren't able to attend the budget workshop. If we look at this chart, it looks like we're about $2 million upside down. Can someone explain for the benefit of our audience how we can appear to be $2 million upside down and still have an approximate $1.8 million surplus in the general fund?
Yes, and thank you for that opportunity. So that $2 million deficit, as we identify, you can imagine that being spread over, that's an aggregate number spread over the 81 funds. And there may even be a select few funds that are the largest contributors to that deficit. But effectively, there are funds that have available cash, savings, if you will, that would be used to satisfy that deficit. So even though we show this as a deficit spend, the budget does balance when you actually rely on the drawing of the actual cash that's in the bank account for those respective funds.
Thank you. And then under the section for noteworthy changes since the budget workshop, specifically in the area of capital projects added, and we have the $450,000 for the traffic technology improvements. And I noticed that this is a $50,000 decrease from what was put forward in the budget workshop. Are we still going to be able to accomplish our goals with a $50,000 reduction here?
I do believe so. In fact, from what I'm gathering, this is likely an improvement that's going to be a multi-year improvement where it's going to require future budget years to continue to invest in this. I certainly don't expect that the $450,000 is going to cover the whole city. It's definitely going to get us started and likely get us started at very critical, maybe more strategic locations, intersections. This is just a starting, and since we don't have a specific scope at this point, which we'll start drafting once this budget is approved, we'll then have a better sense of how much this buys us. So quite honestly, when we put the $500,000 in, it was really just kind of a wag in not knowing exactly how much it's going to get us, but we did know as much that it's going to get us started.
And then on that note, let me thank you for putting in the $50,000 to do the library study. I think that's going to really help the council make, it's going to give us the data that we need to make sound decisions going forward for our residents. With regard to the storm drain fund, you spoke a little bit about the need for a cost of service study. Is that anticipated in this budget?
Yes, it is. In the upcoming fiscal budget or the current fiscal budget? I stand corrected. It's actually money that's budgeted in the current fiscal budget.
Carries over.
So it carries over. I very likely, I've seen the cost of the cost of service study. It's within my purchasing authority, so I wouldn't be surprised having a document on my desk approving it to move forward.
And I just have two final questions very quickly. With regard to the ALPR program, does this system come with a maintenance plan to make sure that the devices themselves are in good working order at all times?
ALPR. But we don't know what that is.
So we may have an amendment at some point to adding in maintenance costs associated with the devices.
What we do know is it's very likely as to the maintenance, if it's not something we can undertake internally. We do know that the way these systems operate, they do require recurring expense because there's definitely a data communication element to it, along with server hosting and things of that nature.
Okay, very good. And then one final question, and this is, unless I have more time, in the budget book on page 89, and it's under the general fund, if anyone wants. And I brought this up at the budget workshop, and I was a little bit concerned about the numbers and had suggested that I would be interested in some additional data on this. I'm going to bring it up again. So if on that page we look at the legal expenses in the year, the fiscal year 18-19, we have 727,100, and for the projected budget of 19-20, we have $704,333.
You have 30 seconds.
That's only a 3% reduction. That's surprising to me, considering that we've, in the past 6 months, made some significant legal settlements. So I'll be requesting an agenda item later so that the council, if it's interested, we can get some further detail on that to unpack the data. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Let's look at CIP projects. There was no mentioning of costs for the 7th Street improvements in Old Town. It's the only one that does not have a cost. Can you tell me how much actually is? I know that it was around 325,000 at one time, but there's nothing listed there under CIP projects.
I'm going to flip through. Brian, do you have a number for the 7th Street improvements, perhaps that you can share with us before we go too deep into flipping through the document?
I know that we approved it, but I don't remember the actual amount.
Well, there's a lighting project in the current budget. That's $395,000. And we're adding an additional $100,000 in the street lighting budget to that project. But in the streets budget, there was a later addition that you didn't see in the workshop for $20,000 because we are going to apply for a grant for street improvements on 7th Street to convert it to one lane in each direction.
So can you give me a total amount?
Application.
Can you just give me a total amount that's going to be
that should be
actual costs?
We think that total project could be in the order of $3 million. So this is not in this budget, and our plan is to apply for a grant to try to fund that in a future year.
Okay.
And I think I may have found it. It likely is page 187. So the $3 million that City Engineer Gangler is speaking to looks like it's intended to be leveraged funds against the $20,000 budgeted expenditure.
I think I used up all my time, but I have one real quick question. You indicated that the commodities cost for VMOs at the Air Force was increasing. We have a system that provides energy at a reduced price. Are we concerned that if that cost keeps going up, that a competitor could provide the cost at equal or less than and shut our system down?
Not at this point. What I know about the updated rate schedule or the latest rate plan that was approved by the PUC for SoCal Edison, their rates have gone up as well, quite a bit. So we believe we're still going to be able to bring forward a rate plan next month to you to where we'll still be able to continue to be at a lower price.
Thank you.
I think it's up to Councilmember Gomez to ask general questions, not related to the budget.
Asked all her questions.
Nope, I didn't.
These are not related to the golf course yet. Please explain. You have Title 2 CFR, formerly known as OMB Circular A-87. That's my first question. My second one is regarding the general fund. Will the table of compensation change for the part-timers that are paid from the general fund? And what budgeting format is being used in the financial department currently? And based on the library, will the table of compensation also change for staff and library? I know you said 50,000, and I'm assuming that goes for anything and anyone and everyone that's in there, meaning staff, but you can verify that. And the last question for that is, what is a government relation consultants? What does that even mean?
Madam Mayor, City Council, I can answer that first question. The OMB A-187 is a reference to the Office of Management and Budget at the federal level, and that's the guidelines that we must follow when doing any cost allocation plan related to any costs that would be included in seeking reimbursement from a federal agency. That's the allocation methodology that must be used in calculating those rates. So if there's a reference in the document to that organization, it's for that purpose. to answer the second question, I believe, regarding part-timers, if you notice during the presentation, there's a reference to there be no changes to the hourly rates for the employees, as what this effort to move off of the furlough was just to add 4 hours per week to their schedule. And so the 10% that's budgeted is derived from the addition of 4 hours, going from 36 hours to 40 hours, and that effectually provides an additional 10% of overall income. When you now look at the part-time schedule, the number of hours are going to be consistent with the number of hours that they worked before. And since there was no change to the hourly rates to the full-time employees, there likewise no change to the hourly rates for the part-time employees. So there's no need to address that at this time. And then if you could repeat the questions after that, I apologize.
Budgeting format, what are you using? And for library, same compensation table approvals for part-timers.
So that would, my previous statement would explain the question for the part-timers at the library. And then the budgeting format, we in essence use a zero-based budgeting format by which we start with the organizational operational costs from the prior year moving forward. And then if you notice in the presentation, we added a slide with a list of assumptions in the presentation. And so as we constructed the document and constructed the budget, there were a list of assumptions that we used to follow, namely those items listed in that slide, those rate increases, getting off of the furlough, revenue assumptions, and therefore.
The government relation consultant, what's that even mean?
That item, governance relation consultant, along with council goal setting, that was a direction given by the city council previously to help establish some settings to where the council can start, perhaps with the help of a consultant, start establishing goals and visions by this council, so we can start setting priorities at the council level, so that they can be shared also then with staff. And then the governance relations consultant was really intended to focus on council relations with management and staff. So those were approved by the city council, and we're just carrying that forward as directed.
Garcia, if that's all the questions of a general nature, it would be perfect for Mr. Cox, as he's leaving the dais right now, to entertain any questions that staff or that the council may have of staff related to limited portions of the budget related purely to the golf course. It's contained within the community services portion. I think the main sections are pages
100 is the one I'm looking at.
Yeah, I thought 99 to 104 essentially, and then there's a discussion, very brief discussion on page 131 about the Golf Fund, which I believe is being eliminated. So at this time, be appropriate to entertain any questions council may have related to any of those issues.
So I just want to make sure that I understand, since Mr. Cox has already stepped out. So at this point, we're going to take up the golf course and do the public hearing on that, and then do our motion and take action, and then have him come back. And then at that point, we'll do the public hearing on everything else. So we're going to, okay, gotcha.
That'd be my preference, yes, to have any questions of staff right now related to the golf course issues. If you have any, then open the public hearing with respect to the golf course issues, and then it would be nice to entertain a motion before we have general discussion on the rest of the budget.
So I'm dividing this into two sections.
Yes, right now, so it would be appropriate to ask if anybody has questions.
So I have a public hearing to hear arguments for and against.
Correct, but
the
before you,
golf course.
yes, before you open that, though, it'd be appropriate to ask if council members have any questions of staff related to the golf course items in the budget.
Are there any questions?
Yes, Madam Mayor, I do. I have one.
Go ahead.
May I?
Yes.
Thank you. So as it relates to the Green Tree Golf Course, if we look at page 100 in our budget binder, or the backup materials, I noticed that our parks are down 26%, even with the golf course being included in Parks and Rec. Can we gain an understanding as to why that is?
Good evening, Madam Mayor and City Council members. The decrease is a collective decrease for the Parks Department, and last year we had the skate park budget included, so it's mostly under the capital component.
Very good. That's all I have, Madam Mayor. Thank you.
Madam Mayor, if I might, just because I think it'll help a little bit as it relates to the golf course. So you'll recall in previous budgets and even the last CAFR, we've dealt with golf course. We've had extensive conversation about golf course, and one thing that we've done is transitioned away from having golf operating in its own separate fund from the general fund. And you'll actually see on page 103 for this fiscal year, that fund is closed out. And so for the purpose of this budget, no different than any other park throughout the city, the golf course is lumped into the park's budget, which it, along with the other parks, effectively gets subsidized by the general fund. And to put it in perspective, your parks budget is 3.289 on page 100. Inside that 3.289, there would be, if you unrolled that number, there'd be about $457,000 that serves as the Green Tree Golf Course subsidy. That's actually down from the current fiscal year of about $464,000, and certainly has been trending downward over the last 5 years, given the work of Sierra Golf being the management company responsible. In fact, when they came on board a little over 5 years ago now, that subsidy was in excess of $500,000, $500,000. So they're making progress, but just to put it in perspective, if you were to try to find the golf course, it would be in that 3.289 number.
Jones, did you have another question?
I'm good. Thank you so much.
Thomas?
So how many budgets and which budgets are used to subsidize the maintenance and operation of the golf course, since community service no longer has that, and neither does, I think it was Solid, there was a golf fund was closed at Enterprise, and then we used to take from 2 other funding sources, and now we've moved it to the general fund. What other funds are we taking money for maintenance and operation?
The Community Service Department is the department that oversees parks, the golf course, along with others. Page 100 probably illustrates it the best for you. And effectively, among those division items in the chart that says division summary, I think the easiest way to characterize it is, with the exception of the last 2, solid waste, recycling, water conservation, with the exception of those 2, facilities, golf, library, park, and recreation, those are all funded from the general fund.
Sorry, would you repeat the last part? What is it?
All funded from the general fund would be your facilities division, your golf.
Where is that at? I'm lost here.
Page 100.
Right.
The top chart on that page that's entitled Division Summary. And under Division Summary, you should see a line item for facilities, a line item for golf, a line item for library, a line item from parks, a line item for recreation. Those, net any revenues they generate, are funded from the general fund.
So, in other words, are you saying that in order to be able to fund the golf course, you take away from library, you take away from parks, you take away from recreation, and you take away from solid waste recycling, landfill mitigation?
No, just the parks budget, just the parks division.
So, because the golf course is a park, it would be taken from those funds?
That's correct.
Okay. So, $1.2 million is the expense, but the way I'm looking at here, it just looks very untransparent to me. You said it was about $457,000 is used for the golf course. Where is the rest of it coming from?
The line item dealing with parks is 3.2, almost 3.3 million, and of that 3.3 million, 457 is for the golf course. The remaining amount, I think, largely you can identify as going to all the other parks, and some of those other parks are Avalon Park, Brentwood, Center Street, Eagle Ranch, Evadale, Grady Trammell, Hollyville, Hook. There's several more.
So are you saying that 457 goes only to golf course, and then the next $700,000 is just swiped out? We no longer use any of that.
No, and it's $3.3 million.
Right.
If we wanted to round up. That is the parks budget. Inside that parks budget is the $457,000 if we were to just try to isolate the Green Tree Golf Course subsidy.
Okay, so is there any way that did you zoom in this let's say average $3.3 million to show exactly how much money is going for the golf course maintenance and operation and everything that goes along with it? Because that's not transparent here, and I know we spent $1.2 million and we lose over $500,000 on that golf course. But now the way you're distributing the information and saying that $457,000 goes to the golf course, now $700,000
You have 30
is free.
seconds.
Well, you can provide that information as hard copies. I'm just trying to understand because I could see a cover up in the way that's being discussed now.
Madam Mayor,
Cover up.
Yeah, there is 1.2 million for $500,000. We're losing $700. Where is it now?
Madam Mayor, if I might, without the attacking tone, because of the comment towards the lack of transparency, that's something that we take very serious. And in fact, the budget and the preparation and all the work that goes into this document is beyond transparent. Every number in this document is explainable. And so for the sake of being
I can't listen. The mayor keeps interrupting.
If I might, for the sake of being clear about what these numbers say, I'd like Janelle Davidson, our Community Services Director, to answer that, please.
Sure. The expenses related to the golf course are actually very simple. There are only 4 of them. The subsidy itself that is paid to SGM under our contract is $457,457. We also budget for some legal fees. That's based on a 3-year average, and that's $3,600. And then under the facilities line item, we do have some obligations under our contract with SGM. So we budget $18,000, and that's for potential heating and air conditioning repairs and roof repairs. And then the last item, we do have some street lighting assessment fees that apply to the golf course. So that's $2,500.
And none of it comes from the general fund, right?
That is all from the general fund.
You say it doesn't come in. Oh, you said it does? Because we're looking at community services department, and so that comes from general fund as well.
Yeah. There are a couple of divisions that are not general funded. That would be your solid waste and your water conservation and your landfill mitigation. Everything else would be funded by the general fund.
Madam Mayor, if that's all of the staff.
I do have a follow-up, if I may. And this is just, you know what, I'll save it into the comment period. It's not really a question. Thank you.
If it's okay with you, Madam Mayor, it'd be good to open the public hearing right now and ask the public to, at this point, just make comments specifically related to the golf course items, if there are any. At that point, then we could bring.
At this time, I open the public hearing, and I do not have any speaker cards. Therefore, I close the public hearing.
You're going to close it just on the portion related to the golf course.
Just on the golf course.
And then.
And I request a motion and a second to adopt resolution.
No, we're not adopting the resolution.
Adopt just the golf course.
Correct. This would be a motion to adopt those portions of the budget pertaining specifically to the golf course.
Madam Mayor, I'm happy to venture a motion if it's your desire. May I venture a motion?
Yes.
Thank you. All right, so I move that the City Council take action to approve the adoption as it relates to the Green Tree Golf Course for the fiscal year 2019-20.
Second.
So I have a question in terms of what we're doing right now, because this agenda, the way it's presented to the public, shows that we're adopting 4 resolutions. And 4 resolutions includes the general fund, which encompasses community services, and then there's a library, and then there's a water, and then there's VITA. So what we're doing here may not only confuse the public, but is certainly confusing me as what we're doing and why it was not bifurcated initially, so it's brought transparently, and I like to use that word, transparently, so that we're showing that we are voting for an item, not just excluding it right at this moment's time, because that's not what is reflected in the agenda. So if you can explain the process of what it is that's being done and clarify the communication so there's no gaps, because there's current
Point
gaps
of
here.
order, we already discussed everything.
No, I'm asking for clarification.
Certainly, if it pleases the mayor, basically what we're doing is we are segregating out for a discussion. The resolution was prepared without the segregation in order to preserve any or avoid any potential conflict by Councilmember Cox. We've decided we will segregate out the discussion with respect to the golf course, entertain a motion on that, adopt that by minute order if it so pleases the council, and then continue with the general public hearing on the remainder and balance of the budget.
Correct. Okay.
I have a motion by Councilmember Jones, seconded by Mayor Garcia. Any further comments?
Yes, just one comment briefly, just because it might be helpful for our residents. When we had the budget workshop some weeks ago, each of the council members was given a general fund subsidy by park breakdown. And I think it's important to note that literally every park receives some subsidy, and the Green Tree certainly receives a subsidy. And it came out, according to this report anyway, at 3.81%. Hook, for example, came out at 7.09%. Doris Davies came out at 3.33, and Rockview at 3.22. So the fact that we have subsidies seems to me to be a normal operating procedure as it relates to our parks. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Any further comments?
Yes, so just for the clarity of everybody that's listening, watching on my channel, Facebook or YouTube or Stream Live, the clarity is we spent $1.2 million still for the golf course. Nothing near for the other 22 parks with your children going to have to play in. But we do have one council member and a former council member and planning commissioners, former council commissioners, that actually live in that golf course. So it's the vested interest of certain pockets of individuals to create the loyalty of 1.2 million still being there. It was an enterprise fund change. We adopted $6.6 million for the golf course, and today we're showing it as $457,000 being expended. So when I use the word transparently, I'm using it to make clarity as to what I perceive as an insider as what is happening here. As to the adoption of a minute order, I don't know how long we've been doing that, but it doesn't seem to be transparent to have something in the general fund not adopted as one motion, but sidetrack it as one individual hairpiece, then adopted. To me, that does not seem transparent, and it's not, I think, equitable to the people that are here for the first time, for the people that have not followed what we're doing here. And that's my comment for that item. Thank you.
I have a motion by Councilmember Jones, seconded by Mayor Garcia. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries with Councilmember Gomez voting no and Councilmember Cox absent.
It'd be appropriate now to have Mr. Cox come back in and discuss the rest of the budget. Mayor Garcia, you've already asked for council member comments on the regular budget. It'd be appropriate just to reopen the public hearing with respect to the balance of the budget.
At this time, I open the public hearing. And this is for
This is for the budget item B1, everything excluding
For
the golf course.
budget
I don't
item
believe you have any.
B1.
I don't believe you have any cards, but you could ask of
excluding
anybody.
the golf
Correct.
course item. Okay. And I do not have any speaker cards at this time. Therefore, I close the public hearing. And I request a motion and a second to adopt resolution numbers 19-042, LBT 19-001, SCLAA-19-005, BWD-19-006, and R-SA-19-001.
And could I request that motion just make it clear that on resolution 19042, it is exclusive of the golf course items in the budget?
Oh, that was the, okay. So moved.
Second.
I have a motion by Councilmember Jones, seconded by Councilmember Cox. Any further comments? All those in favor?
So
Aye.
I'm going to ask the question now. So for the future outlook, I'm looking at the general fund versus the expenditures. When I look at this, first of all, with the x-axis, I'm not sure what the vertical line means, 52 to 82. And then another question with that was, I don't even know what the mean and what the typical revenue scores are being used, if the standard deviation is plus or minus 1, and what central tendencies of dispersion we're using for this line graph. And this is regarding the PowerPoint presentation that the manager provided. And so I made sure that I asked the question now, because I wasn't sure if I could even ask the question prior to when Mr. Cox wasn't here. Do you understand what I'm asking? I'm talking about the normal curve, and I'm assuming that this is based on that normal curve and the central tendency of dispersion.
Those are very, very specific terminology used for statistics.
Right.
So what you have in that chart is an example of actual projections based on growth from past year's activity. So you have actual money spent in the prior years. You have actual money proposed to be spent in the current year in the 18-19 category. And the 1920 reflects what was just approved by the council for 1920. And then you have percentage increases recommended for each year thereafter to present a forecast. This was not a statistical analysis. It was simply a percentage increase from the current year, which was just recently approved. So now if we wanted to get into the statistics of it, we can talk about the likelihood of the revenues landing where they are. We chose a simpler method of simply just adding 1%, 3% based on the categories that you have.
Right, and the social sciences use two types of statistics, descriptive and inferential. And the reason why I'm addressing it in this way is because you're not using proportions, you're actually using percentages based on a data that I don't, to me, it doesn't have. That's why I'm asking, what does the axis for Y here mean?
So that's cash.
Okay.
It's a cash number on that y-axis, and on your x-axis is time, the fiscal years.
And I'm going to take the time to read this letter.
Andre, are we to continue with our agenda, or is
Right. Well, this is questions related to the motion that's pending on the floor right now. No, just
Okay, so I have here an information email. It was to Deputy Finance Director, City Manager, staff in the various departments that are part of the financial process. And this is my letter. It said, before our next budget term review and also our yearly budget appropriations approval, I would like to suggest and recommend that we use that zero-based and outcome-based budgeting format to bring the council, stakeholders, residents, and the community at large for the opportunity to looking at what programs are fully funded, partially funded, and how they are affected the quality of life and engagement in diverting crime in the city of Victorville. And the ongoing process to be fine-tooth combed for public resources, which we're expended the monies are on. I wanted to encourage our financial department to allow the city stakeholders and the participants to be a very active participant into the budgeting process of the city finances and how it looks at the public resources overall. This way, we will all have the opportunity to look at units per cost that would cause residents and its taxpayers to keep partial and fully funded programs. I noticed that I didn't finish reading this letter, but I'm going to submit it to be a part of today's record, and you can fully access it. This was in September 2018. This was not incorporated, and so sad to say, yes, I am taking a master's in public administration, which gradually allows me to use the technology and the terms that Mr. Harris has professed is very technicalized, and that is so the case, but it also allows me to better understand why it is that the council needs to provide suggested information, recommendation, and requests in terms of what is taking place here, because our monies and our appropriations are very important because they're not ours, they're yours, and we're held at a very large scale of accountability.
Any further comments? Motion made by Councilmember Jones, seconded by Councilmember Cox. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries with Councilmember Gomez voting no.
Now we move on to item B2, a public hearing to hear arguments for and against adding Chapter 2.19 to Title II of the Victorville Municipal Code, requiring the use of online or electric filing of campaign statements and statements of economic interest. Madam Clerk, read the recommendation.
That the City Council open the public hearing, take testimony, close the public hearing, introduce ordinance number 2390 for adoption and first reading by title only, and waive further reading in full.
Thank you. Council members, do you have any questions of staff at this time? 2-minute time limit. I'll start with Ms. Jones.
I have none. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
No?
I have no comments.
Yeah.
I have no questions.
Ms. Gomez?
I have no questions.
Oh, you don't? Okay. So, yes, I do. Why wasn't this issue addressed when we did the workshop a few months ago to address the circulation elements of the city's general plan is my first question. The second one is what developers specifically? Yeah, B2.
B2 is dealing with
This.
electronic filing of campaign statements.
Oh, okay. So I do have a question. Thank you for that clarification. For B2 then, I was told that candidates can submit their information, their 700s in person. Will this system now allow candidates, or I'm sorry, the elected officials to submit everything online?
Correct.
Thank you. That was the only question for that.
At this time, I open the public hearing, and I do not have any speaker cards. Therefore, I close the public hearing, and I need a motion. No, I'm sorry. Madam Clerk, please read the title of ordinance number 2390.
An ordinance of the City Council of the City of Victorville, California, adding a new chapter 2.19 to Title II of the Victorville Municipal Code, requiring the use of online or electronic filing of campaign statements and statements of economic interest.
Thank you. At this time, I do need a motion and a second to introduce and waive further reading of ordinance number 2390.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion by Councilmember Jones, seconded by Mayor Garcia. Any further comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Item B3, case number plan 19-00007 a public hearing to hear arguments for and against an amendment to the circulation element of the City of Victorville's general plan with a negative environmental declaration to reclassify Amethyst Road and Bellflower Street to major arterial street sections. Madam Clerk, read the recommendation.
That the City Council conduct the public hearing, adopt a negative declaration for the project pursuant to Section 15070 of the California Environmental Quality Act, and adopt Resolution Number 19-044 approving the general plan amendment.
Thank you. Council members, do you have any questions of staff at this time?
Yes. So why wasn't this issue addressed when we did the workshop a few months ago addressing the circulation element of the city's general plan? What developers specifically were interested in developing their properties that are fronting undeveloped portions of Amethyst Road and Bellflower Street? Who made these requests? Another question. So the streets will go from being super arterial streets, which is 3 lanes both ways, to now becoming the major arterial streets, which is 2 lanes in each direction. Please define the super arterial against the major arterial streets and provide a popular current landmark as an example for understanding of these.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, fellow council members. I can address the first 2 questions, and then I'll punt it off to our city engineer, Brian Gingler, to kind of elaborate more on the cross section. So, as mentioned by Councilmember Gomez, we did modify the circulation element last year, and that was related to bringing it in conformance with state requirements related to complete streets, where we added bike lanes on all of the streets. This proposal is related to the actual designation of the street. We have super arterials, major arterials, and they all have different widths and different components within those. So I'll let Brian go into that. But as far as like what spurred this application that was brought forward by staff was we have 2 developers that one is RY Properties. They have a tract that fronts Bellflower Street, and we also have a tract by KB Homes that's on the southern part of Amethyst. They were impacted by the change in our circulation element that occurred back in 2008. So these tracts that went from back in 2008, we had a major arterial designation. That's 2 lanes in each direction. The circulation element changed to 3 lanes in each direction. Upon review of that, what we're bringing forward and reconciling is the fact that it was an overstatement in 2008. The traffic demand's not there to build out 3 lanes in each direction. It will function fine at 2 lanes in each direction when it's built out in the future. So that kind of sums up the proposal. But Brian, did you want to go in more on the difference in the designation?
I can give an example of a super arterial. Bear Valley Road is a super arterial. It has 3 through lanes in each direction with a center lane. The center lane's either a left turn lane or in some cases a median. An example of a major arterial would be portions of Amethyst Road where it has wider portions. It's 2 lanes in each direction, but a major arterial can be wider. Green Tree is an example of a major arterial. It has 2 lanes in each direction, but it tends to be wider than an arterial road. So those are some examples in our city of those kind of roads.
Thank you. I appreciate the explanation.
Thank you. Did you have anything, Jim?
No.
At this time, I open the public hearing, and I do not have any speaker cards. Therefore, I close the public hearing, and I need a motion and a second to adopt a negative declaration for the project and to adopt resolution number 19-044.
So move.
Second.
Motion by Councilmember Cox, seconded by Councilmember Jones. Any further comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Item B4, case number Plan 17-00013, a public hearing to hear arguments for and against a tentative tract map development plan and planned unit development modification to allow for a 110-lot senior citizen single-family residential subdivision with a mitigated negative declaration on property located at the northeast corner of Nisqually Road and 9th Avenue. Madam Clerk, read the recommendation.
That the City Council conduct the public hearing, adopt a mitigated negative declaration for the project pursuant to Section 15070 of the California Environmental Quality Act, introduce ordinance number 2391 for adoption and first reading by title only, waive further reading in full of proposed ordinance number 2391, adopt resolution number 19-045, approving a single-family tentative tract map for 110 lots, and adopt resolution number 19-046, approving a development plan for the planned unit development.
Thank you. At this time, do we have any questions of staff? 2-minute time limit. Start with Ms. Jones.
And thank you, Madam Mayor.
Mayor?
Yes, 2 items. I was pleased and surprised that as a part of this project, they're going to include the existing development that's there, which may be included in this so that they can use the amenities that they're going to be constructing. And I looked for and didn't find, and if it's there and I missed it, my apologies, with that housing development, with the signalization, I don't know what it is. Well, anyway, it's there at the corner. There's no signal in front. Is there going to be a widening for a right turn in, right turn out?
You're referring to the intersection of Nisqually and 9th?
Well, there's an entrance off of Nisqually that goes into this project that's not signalized, and so, because the signal is half a block west.
Yes, there's no conditions of this track to install a traffic signal. So that's
I know that, and
Okay.
it wouldn't be likely you'd have too many traffic signals on Nisqually. You have a traffic signal at another project to the west. But entering and leaving the project, there's not going to be added right turn in, right turn out in the mid-block for that.
Might be able to answer that question. If you're talking about Nisqually Road itself, Nisqually Road is not proposed to be widened for a right turn approaching an intersection to this development. Was that what you were asking? But there's not a proposal to actually change Nisqually Road itself.
Okay. Okay.
I don't know if that was your question.
Well, in the middle block where the development occurs, there's going to be a lot of traffic going in and going away. You have a left turn lane for the going in, but people going west on Nisqually will not have a merge lane to slow down and go in, and those coming out. And when you consider the proposed population age and the number of traffic coming out and going west, there's no merge lane. I just wondered if that was considered.
No, there is not an additional right turn lane proposed on Nisqually Road.
Okay. And you don't think it's needed? Development staff engineer, you didn't think it was needed?
No, there was no traffic study that showed that there was a need for a right turn lane there.
Thank you. That's all I had. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
So, Scott, I have 7 questions for you, so I'm going to shoot them out. So my first question is the planning unit development. Is that one across Mountain Vista? I think it is, but you can verify later. Explain also what that non-voting class of the membership for the new HOA that will be created. I read a little bit. I don't think I quite understood it. Perhaps I did, but your explanation will help. The next question is, will this be considered affordable housing? How many rooms, minimum, maximum, and the average cost? Do you already know that? Is it in the plans? I didn't see it when I read it. And then if you look at page 18, there's records reflecting that the landscape assessment, something about HOA and landscaping. I don't know if it's like a hybrid or option, so it's pertinent to the former questions that I provided. The new seniors will be paying for increases to maintain a landscape through a no-vote class, through an LMAD and an HOA. I don't think they're going to have an option, but I don't understand, so that's another question pertaining to that. And also, would you be able to tell council a little bit more about the 1987 partially developed 73 homes that currently exist in the southeastern 10 acreage? And does staff know why Kurth abstained from voting? I don't know if why he abstained. I didn't say it in the notes. And what is the term CC and Rs referring to? What does that even spell out?
Sure, I'll give it a shot. Let's hear. So you referred to the non-voting class. There will be a homeowners association established for this development. It will include the area that's currently undeveloped. Now, the area that's currently developed, they will have the option to become part of the association and could be a voting member. You mentioned about the homeowners association versus the assessment district. That is correct. There will be an assessment district, an LMAD, that will maintain the exterior street landscaping. The HOA will be responsible for maintaining their clubhouse and their pool and any internal amenities. The developer has not mentioned that this is an affordable product, and they're not at a position to know the cost at this point. The project was developed in 1987, well, partially developed. That's when their original plan unit development was approved. It allows up to or a minimum lot size of close to 3,500 square feet. This is smaller for senior development. About 73 lots currently exist on the 10 acres on that southwest portion. Commissioner Kurth did recuse himself. I believe he had some real estate transaction that may have been related to this, so that's why he recused himself. CCNRs stand for conditions, restrictions.
Covenants, conditions, and restrictions.
Sorry. Thank you. And those are something that...
Sorry, I didn't catch that.
Covenants, conditions, and restrictions.
And then...
And those are typically related to establishing a HOA, could relate to the restrictions on the age. Since this is senior housing, it would relate to people being 55 and older to live in the community.
And my last question, Mr. Cox brought it up, you know, the Desert Villas. I consistently visit these seniors on a monthly basis. They always complain about not being able to cross out. So we've established a portion where they can at least have, you know, less accidents. And I think this is what he was addressing. If there is no on-traffic stopping, will the seniors now continue to complain when we have this development? I can foresee something like that and of that nature.
We did have a resident complain about the traffic, but the traffic engineer did follow up with that resident afterwards, and I have not received any follow-up complaint from that resident.
Thank you.
Thank you.
May I ask? Okay. I noticed in this particular housing project, they said it was going to be an upgrade, such as a clubhouse, a swimming pool, and some area of a park. Is that a requirement of the city, or is that a requirement of the zoning?
It is a requirement of new plan unit developments. So when this project was originally approved in 1987, the city didn't have established standards for plan unit development. So since then, approximately about 3 years ago, the city put in place guideline standards for plan unit development. So if a developer wants to come to the city and develop smaller lots, there's a trade-off. You have to provide some amenities that go along with that. So that's why this developer brought forward with their track map a plan unit development modification to make it more in line with the city's requirements.
So my assumption is that we have an HOA fees with this housing. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah, the developer would establish that.
There is a senior housing adjacent to that. Do they pay HOA?
I believe no. There may be an association started, but I don't believe there is an active.
Well, the reason I'm asking is because there was a statement in the documents that said that's because they do not have a clubhouse and because they do not have a swimming pool, they have the right to go use it. And I'm looking at the fact that those who are going to be buying these new homes are going to be required to pay fees, whereas those who are adjacent can come in and use them. So I see there's a question of inequity.
The developer wanted to leave that option available for the existing homes, but they will only be able to use those amenities if they become part of the HOA.
If they join
Correct.
and make it a whole neighborhood.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's it. Okay, at this time, I open the public hearing, and I do have one card. Scott Sprague. Scott? Anyone here that want to speak on before? No? Okay. That was the only card that I had. At this time, I close the public hearing. And can I have our Madam Clerk read the title of ordinance number 2391?
An ordinance of the City Council of the City of Victorville granting the Plan Unit Development Modification portion of case number PLAN 17-00013, a tentative track map, development plan and Plan Unit Development Modification to allow for a 110-lot senior citizen single-family residential subdivision with a mitigated negative declaration.
Thank you. At this time, I need a motion and a second to approve a mitigated negative declaration for the project, introduce and waive further reading of ordinance number 2391, and adopt resolution numbers 19-045 and 19-046.
I'll make the motion to adopt the recommendation from administration in this agenda item.
Do we have a second?
A second.
I have a
There was a motion to adopt the staff recommendation.
Yes. It's a staff recommendation.
Ms. Gomez, they didn't understand what she said.
No, she made the motion. I seconded it.
I have a motion by Councilmember Gomez, seconded by Councilmember Cox. Any further comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Now we move on to consent calendar. We have two items, C1 and C2, and they can be approved with one motion unless a council member requests an item to be pulled for further discussion.
I have comments and questions on both C1 and C2.
Madam Mayor, that being the case, I move that we remove items C1 and C2 from the consent calendar for separate consideration.
Ms. Jones, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
I'm sorry, can everybody hear me? It doesn't sound like my mic is on. It's on. You can hear me. Good. All right. So, in light of Councilmember Gomez's comments, I move that we remove items C1 and C2 from the consent calendar for separate consideration.
Okay, so my comment for C1, I wanted to revise a comment that was made.
A second.
Is there a second? I did not hear a second.
I'm
Second.
sorry.
The motion was to remove items C1 and C2 from the consent calendar to allow for separate discussion on them.
That is the consent calendar.
We're removing them because Councilmember Gomez wishes them to be considered separately.
Is there a second? There being
Well,
no
I'm going to second it.
Oh, you
I
second.
can.
Motion made by Councilmember Jones, seconded by Councilmember Gomez. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
So I wanted to revise a comment that was made recently in a meeting. I had asked city managers a few questions which weren't able to be responsive in terms of actual figures without the vagueness. When one of the council members to the addition stated that the questions were either some type of violation or illegality to employee rights. Although I knew I had something to stand on, it was quickly mistaken, and it was alleged that I was violating the city manager's privacies. So C1 shows the net pay for the city manager in the contract, which is also a public document for transparency's sake. And for the appropriateness of the monies displayed, there's also the gross pay, which is in his contract. So I just wanted to clarify that the net and the gross for our city employee, the manager, is public information, and inform you guys how important it is to be attuned into what happens, into what is public and what is not public, if there essentially is anything for us not to be public. For C2, Southern California approximately spends $161,000, and there's several checks for several things, several fees, several responsibilities. I'm not sure how this all fits into the street lighting funds, the revenues, and the expenses. I thought we had 2.1 million in terms of expenses. Now here we have $500,000, but we have all these checks that were rendered. I can't bring these together if I don't know what they implement or what they mean. There's a sponsorship for the BIA conference of $1,000. I'm not sure what that entailed. Marketing, did we get any feedback, any perks? I don't know what we did. Any details to the reimbursement of the cannabis control for our code enforcement. This is California cannabis control item that we used for the amount of about $233. I'm not sure what that was about. If you can provide me the information that's itemized for public safety, Verizon Wireless. I see we have several expenses. One check for public safety, use of phones, I'm assuming, through Verizon, $2,688. And then there's a contract with Woodard and Curran for operations and management, covering about almost $300,000. No, one cent. Yeah, $300,000 for Verizon Wireless. I'm not sure what these are and what these mean, so if you can provide hard copies in my inbox and explanation, I'm more than glad to let this go, but I would like to know that information. Will the city manager be providing that information in my inbox?
Madam Mayor and members of the council, it's certainly at the pleasure of the council how you want me to handle this. The item that she is speaking to would require some research and some follow-up, and I'm certainly willing to do it at the pleasure of the council.
Yeah, I don't mind you providing it in my inbox.
There's a lot of staff time involved besides copies. I think sooner or later we're going to have to get a report on how much it costs to be providing all these copies.
Yeah, and you're speaking out of turn too.
So,
I don't see any problem with providing the information. It's
I can always do a public records request if that's
exactly what I was going to
that's
say.
the information. If you want to not let me have that information, I mean, I could still grab it. I mean, I don't know what the difficulties are. I could have said, please answer the questions now, and there would
please
have been a vote.
provide her with whatever
but
she
there
needs.
wasn't. So if you
Enough
can provide
discussion.
it, I would greatly appreciate it.
Please provide her with whatever she needs. End of discussion.
So, Madam Mayor, I do have one comment on item C1, if I may.
Go ahead.
Thank you very much. So, to be helpful, on item C1, the discussion about total net, etc. If we look at the backup materials on this particular item, we'll notice that there's employee ID numbers and check and so forth. But that's and the total net, but that's general information. So the actual employee that it relates to is not public. So what we had done in a prior meeting and not disclosing the details as to how a particular employee arrives at the net was and remains particularly confidential. That any council member might have access to that does not mean that it's information that is accessible to the public for obvious personnel reasons and confidentiality. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you for that information.
So I move the items for approval.
Second.
Motion made by Councilmember Gomez, seconded by Councilmember Jones. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Now we move on to written communications. Item D1, ratification of sewer trench repair at Dean Avenue east of 3rd Avenue. The recommendation is that the City Council ratify the sewer trench repairs at Dean Avenue east of 3rd Avenue in the amount of $31,070.36. Are there any questions from council members of staff at this time?
Just what area of the city is this? I could have looked it up on a map. I will, but I thought maybe staff.
Dean
had that.
Avenue and Third Avenue?
But just my first impression was that the sewer lines aren't in Dean Avenue, so. I'll get the information later. Thank you.
It actually is. It was a sewer trench that settled the soil above the sewer main. Settled, we think, partly due to a water leak and partly due to rainwater. So, as I recall, I think Dean is not far from 3rd Avenue in that area.
Okay, thank you.
Have any questions?
Yes. So what other municipal codes and chapters give discretion to the city council and the city manager? If you would please cite them. If they're not already do so, please place the information in my inbox. I would greatly appreciate it. I need to have those types of controlling, or I think council should, controlling sources, titles, and codes. And was there a memo, emergency memo, distributed to city council? Because I don't remember having or seeing any. And has the city or staff heard or received information or otherwise made any contact with anyone who has experienced issues, witnessed any of it, or felt concerns in terms of this item? And what about from the neighbors, anyone that was affected, the use of the road, etc.? I looked at the pictures. Thank you for that.
Madam Mayor, the governing code sections are identified in the staff report, calling attention to Municipal Code Section 2.28.050, also 2.28.240. Those combined are the sections of the municipal code that allows the city manager to act under emergency to get work done that creates a threat to public health and safety. My understanding the location of this is in the 3rd Avenue area. I believe it's just north of Nisqually Road. And as to I guess feedback or complaints or comments, as much as we gathered, was responding to an unsafe condition, so it wasn't so much an issue driven by complaint. It was more so an issue that was recognized by us, acknowledged, and dealt with when we thought there was a threat to public safety.
I'm sorry, you went through the codes quite quickly. It's still under Title 2, and you said 2.28.50?
It's right in the staff report.
Well, I didn't see it, so if you could point out the actual page, I would appreciate it.
Page 236.
Thank you.
One else? I do not have any. Thank you. I do not have any speaker cards. Therefore, I need a motion in a second.
So moved, Madam Mayor.
Second.
Motion made by Councilmember Cox, seconded by Mayor Garcia. Any further comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Item D2, request to release the remaining 20% of the water securities for track map number 14751. Madam Clerk, read the recommendation.
That the City Council approve the release of the remaining 20% of the faithful performance securities for the water improvements for track map number 14751.
Thank you. Any questions from council members of staff at this time?
So this is the comment section, right? No questions.
We're in questions right now. We don't have a motion yet.
This is questions of staff.
Didn't we just go through questions? No? Okay, well, anyways, I'm going to go ahead and ask one question here. So the one code that I didn't get was, you gave me the one for emergency, which thank you for the page. But the other code that I'm looking at is the power vested in you to be able to provide that emergency. Or is it entailed? Is that what you're saying, Mr. Metzler?
I think we're on item D2 now.
We're on item D2. Any questions? None?
And for
Yes.
me, Madam Mayor.
For item D2, what does it mean interpretively to exonerate the water securities, this track map? Please use context for ease of comprehension in your response, being sensitive to all levels of understanding in our community, current spectators, and non-technical entities listening in.
I think the easiest way to characterize it differently than using the term exonerate is to retire the bonds. Effectively, the bonds will be removed, and there's no further security requirement for the tract.
Okay, and I know what exonerate means, right? It has different thesaurus words that are elevated into it. But what I was more seeking was, because I perceive this to be something procedural. I see it very often enough, but I haven't captured the essence of what these track maps and why these water securities are required to go through a certain process. So I guess that's really what I'm trying to capture in the brief explanation that you would be able to provide.
Yes, so securities will typically be required either for the materials or for the actual labor or the actual performance of the improvements installed. And this is a particular track where water improvements have been installed. They've been installed for some time to where certain components of the security have already been relieved. This is a final component, the 20% dealing with just the performance side of the improvements, and the improvements have lasted to the point where they are acceptable to the city and allowing for the release of the remaining securities. Brian, is there anything more that we can add?
The only thing I would add is that this is a routine procedure on any bonds that are held on a track. So when the improvements are completed and we've inspected them, this is very typical. We release or exonerate the bonds, the final amount of the bonds, and then we accept the improvements for maintenance. So in this case, they're water improvements. It's just a routine procedure. You'll see these coming on future agendas for other tracks.
Thank you.
I do not have any speaker cards, therefore I need a motion in a second.
Yes, Madam Mayor, I move that the council take action in accordance with the recommendations set forth on the agenda.
Second.
Motion made by Councilmember Jones, seconded by Mayor Garcia. Any further comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Item D3, contract change order 6 and the notice of completion for runway 17/35. Rehabilitation phases 1A and 1B. Madam Clerk, read the recommendation.
That the Southern California Logistics Airport Authority Board of Directors approve contract change order 6 to the runway 1735 rehabilitation project phases 1A and 1B, project number CC 17-111, thereby increasing the amount of the construction agreement by and between the Southern California Logistics Airport Authority and Kaufman Specialties by $119,685.21 for a new total contract amount not to exceed $12,409,168.82. Authorize the execution of contract change order 6 by the airport director and city engineer. Approve the notice of completion for this project and authorize the airport director to execute the notice of completion.
Thank you. At this time, do we have any questions of staff?
Yes. So I have 5 questions for you. So what's the current and the former aircraft that is in-house at SLA that has refused to use the runway due to the dilapidated conditions? And what were their reasons for such refusal? I'm assuming safety. And please distinguish in your explanation the current and any former aircrafts. My second question is, was the runway light circuit a foreseeable expense that could have been avoided had pavement reconstruction gone favorably, or better steps to forecast a rewiring of the box? The third one is, does the $12,409,168.62 reflect the completion of the total cost of runway 1735? What percentage of this was outside using grants versus internal monies that were reappropriated for the project approximately? What payment amount approximately is left to release to Kaufman, the contractors? And fifth, so you can confirm, so approximately $12 million increasing the rate of a 50 being a poor to a 70 being fair. Please confirm how much of that main runway was addressed with the $12 million and of its over 2.2 million square footage by referring to attachment A for visual ease. I see 5,900, but I wanted confirmation on that.
A lot of questions there.
Yes.
Let me start with I think the big picture, and the big picture is that all in all, this project went over 3.7%. If you net out the fact that we did some extra work, that West Side pipeline project, you're down to about 2% overage. That's pretty impressive by any standards, particularly a project that's built on an old military base, and we found a few surprises underneath the soil. So I think that speaks to some of the costs that you had. Help me with what some of the other questions. As far as who wouldn't use it, we had some problems with the airport wouldn't use the runway. We had some problems with the Royal Air Force. I'm glad to announce that they just came back. They brought a tanker back in last week, and we anticipate them coming back in the future. The reason they're coming back is the most serious of the damaged portion of the runway. That center section is where the largest stability problems happened for the aircraft that were landing, has been repaired. That's in that section. I think we've got an attachment here that shows the concrete portion that was repaired. We have, I think you asked a question about how many, percentage-wise, how much is done. We finished about 5,900 feet out of 15,000.
I don't know if she's done yet.
And what was the approximate amount left to release to Kaufman, the contractor?
I'm sorry, say again, please.
Kaufman needs to get paid. What is the amount balance?
The balance that is owed right now is the change order amount that we're discussing and the 5% retention.
Okay, so it's what's already in this document. And, all right, that's it. Thank you.
Go ahead, Rita.
I would like to know why, as you attempted to repair the runway, that it was so different in depth. Some very shallow, some other very deep. How is it possible that that could have happened? And with these repairs, how long will it be without a repair?
Okay, let me ask the last part first. I have all the confidence in the world that we just built 40-year pavement. So I think we've got pavement that, given the traffic life that we anticipate here and the quality of this design and the construction, we have got pavement that's going to outlive us. So we think longevity-wise we're in good shape. Why do we find different sections out there and different things? Boy, that's a good question. I wish we knew. One of the things that we see over the years of military bases is that they tend to grow ad hoc, and one generation builds something and then somebody else builds something on top of it, and the record keeping has been very poor over the years.
When was it the last time that you looked at the runway prior to this repair? How long ago was it?
That we did some repairs on it?
In regards to looking at the condition of the runway, because I can't imagine how one was 3, one was 6, and when they took it off, it was cement. I mean, it just boggles the mind.
It is. We inspect it each and every day, so there's not a day that goes by that we don't physically look at it. The question is, when do you have the ability to implement a large-scale project like this to fix it? So we, quite frankly, have been doing a lot of repairs and lesser-grade improvements to it over the years, just trying to limp it along. And we're still doing that. We've still got the rest of the runway to rebuild, but the important part is the most critical area has been replaced. So we feel good that as we move into subsequent years that we've bought some time with this repair to finish the rest of it.
I'm going to just make a statement, a personal statement. The reason I'm asking is because SCAGS wants to do regional airports, and ours was mentioned. And so I'm concerned about the safety and the well-being as well as the repair, and I'm asking,
okay,
how long is it going to be good?
It's going to be good. So if we want to get technical, our index has went up significantly of the runway. So that's the pavement condition index. Where 70 is a fair. We are now at Yeah, we're at the fair mark, so we are beyond. We're in better shape than what we were. It is safe. It gets inspected every day. We have confidence that we have a solid runway. We do.
Eric, this is a little technical, but that PCI, especially considering the fact that you just completed a major stretch of the runway, so you would think a higher PCI for the runway, but my belief is that there's a large section that is or older, I should say, that's dragging down the average on that 100 scale. Because if I understand correctly, the PCI scale is 100. If you're at fair 70, it's likely that you're bringing it up. We still have some other sections of the runway that need
You're
attention.
exactly correct. The section that was put in is 100 right now, and it will remain 100 if we anticipate for a number of years before it slowly starts to degrade. But we've got some sections that are obviously below 70. That's where the average comes in.
In where that measure, I can certainly recall times where one of the first questions, say for a flight testing operation, before they would even consider operating here, would be that PCI 70. Based upon the experiences we have, gets you there to where they're willing to operate at your facility. I think the lower number certainly becomes questionable.
And there are future phases planned, correct, Eric?
Yes, ma'am, there are.
It just signifies 1A and 1B.
Right.
There was a question about grants. I'm not sure if we answered it, but it was I know FAA has been the largest funding source for this and will be the largest funding source for future phases. Are we in 90%?
Yes, sir, 90%. 90% FAA contribution, 10% local match.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that information. I do not have any speaker cards, so I need a motion and a second.
Madam Mayor, so move staff recommendation.
Second.
Motion by Councilmember Cox, seconded by Councilmember Jones. Any further comments?
Yes.
Aye.
So I'd like to provide a comment. I greatly appreciate the detail and the history that was invoked in this reporting. I didn't need the former documentations approved by council to recall much of what was being approved due to the consistency of that reporting. So much is appreciated. Keep up that type of reporting. Thank you.
I'm sorry, did I get that? Did you second that? I'm sorry. A motion by Councilmember Cox, seconded by Mayor Garcia. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
And now we move on to D4, request to approve award of a general services provider's standard agreement for the application of chemical root control agent. Madam Clerk, read the recommendation.
That the City Council approve the award of a general services provider standard agreement to Duke's Root Control Incorporated in the not-to-exceed amount of $75,000 for the application of chemical root control agent to sanitary sewers at various locations within the city limits on as a needed basis for fiscal year 2019-2020.
Thank you. Any questions of staff?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
In regards to these chemicals that are being used, have we asked if it's cancerous or not, like the fact of Roundup being sued? I wouldn't want the city to put itself in jeopardy if we don't ask this question. Does anyone know? In terms of the materials that are being used, because if they're going to be used throughout the city can be jeopardized if we don't look at the composition of the material that is being used.
Good question.
Of health.
I'm not going to be able to tell you the specific chemicals that are used, but I do know that this process is a tried and true process. It's been used for many years, and it's also acceptable to the sewer treatment plant that receives it at Viva de Brea and our plant. So there's nothing in the chemicals that are
it's water soluble then, right?
that are poisonous or a threat to public health. All they do is they basically they dissolve roots that intrude into the sewer.
Anyone else?
Yes. What does the unit price of $1.55 per unit represent? The chemical product, is that representative of the chemical product on root growth? And will the chemicals produced by this root abatement possibly have access to the rivers? And do you guys have any concerns? I did read the email exchanges. There was a concern, but I don't know if it was specifically towards the item that was the chemical that was going to be used. But I did read a concern, so I want to verify publicly.
The first question applies to the application over the lineal feet of sewer line. So that's the charge per lineal foot. I'm sorry as to the second part. I just didn't understand the second part of the question.
I'll repeat it. So will the chemicals produced by this root abatement possibly have access to the river? And are there any concerns? Because the email exchange showed a concern, but I don't recall if it was a particular approval of what was going to be used by other organizations.
My understanding is there's no expectation that there's a way for it to reach the river.
So I'll just read the email, just that little portion on page 276. It says, I am unsure that the chemical will pass through our plant and into our effluent, but it does cause me to pause and be concerned because we discharge into a river. So I just wanted clarification. I could just be interpreting it. I'm sure it's not the full length of the reporting and the understanding, so an interpretation was required. That's why I brought it forth here today and asked the question.
The specifics about the acceptability and the danger or acceptableness of the chemical that's being used is located on 268 of the staff report. It talks about what is acceptable to VVWRA, and that ties to those emails.
Thank you.
So this product is acceptable.
There. Mm-hmm. Okay, at this time, I do not have any speaker cards. Therefore, I need a motion and a second.
So move.
Second.
Motion by Councilmember Cox, seconded by Councilmember Gomez. Any further comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Item D5, discussion regarding the Victorville City Library. This is an item requested by Mayor Pro Tem Rita Ramirez. I do have some cards, so I will call for those first, okay? Bill Pyle is the first one. After Bill will be Valentin Godina.
Madam Mayor, Councilman, Councilwomen, little history. In 2006, a city councilman, and I don't recall his name, requested that the Friends provide a study of public libraries regarding their best practices in the area of buildings and equipment. Library programs were not part of that study. The library review was submitted in April 2007 to the then library director, who was also the PIO, I believe, for the city, Ms. Yvonne Hester. Some 275 photographs were part of that review, and the review covered libraries from here to about Illinois, I believe. A lot of vacation time spent on reviewing libraries. And while the data is 12 years old, it remains, I believe, very applicable today with perhaps some minor updating. I believe the idea at the time, 2006, 2007, was to take the study and along with development funds begin the improvement of our existing library and to initiate plans for a second library. with the withdrawal of the funds by the state, this program went awry. While the city did make some very significant improvements to the library, no further formal plans were set. And now, the Friends of the Library are very excited and supportive of the Council's renewed effort in upgrading our city library services. The setting aside of funds for a strategic planning consultant, which were spoken to a few moments ago, maybe an hour ago, is a very major step in recognizing the value of city library services. We're really glad that you picked up on having a strategic plan developed. We're also encouraged by the city staff's work in reviewing the placement of volunteers in the library, the difficult area, I understand, and the continuance of efforts in the area of grant writing. So as a representative of the Friends Group, one of them, we want to thank you for your efforts on behalf of the residents of the city to provide greater, better library services. Thank you.
Thank you. Valentin Godina. After Valentin will be Kay Pate.
Good afternoon, City Council. And on behalf of the library and Friends of the Library, thank you very much for taking this issue up and for consideration. I'd like to read some of the statements from the resolution that was signed on behalf of the library in 2005. The City Council at that time recognized that the city library was an integral component of a quality of lifestyle for its citizens. The library, the Victorville Library, is one of the most used library systems in the San Bernardino County. Currently, library services are no longer adequate for Victorville's growing population, and that was in 2005. And now we are more than double the size, so an urgent need to revisit the old plans that we had for the library need your full attention, and we thank you for bringing it this far, and we hope we can be of help to further this along. Thank you.
Thank you. Kay Pate. Have to speak to the mic.
The Library Association Services did a study, and they found that every dollar that the community invests in library services, they receive $5 back. Now that's a pretty good investment. Thank you.
Thank you. Amy Stanton.
Council members, I want to thank you very much for starting the planning process to improve Victorville's library services. It would have been very easy to just go ahead with the proposed use of the discretionary funds and put this off for next year, and then there'll be another year and another year. Jenny Lynch attended our Friends meeting today and updated us, and she and George Carter emphasized that we're all on the same side, and that's excellent news, and we want to be supporters and not detractors. With that in mind, and with regard to public safety, statistics suggest that library literary services show that the increasing demand, or may reduce the increasing demand for public safety services. So approximately 85% of youth who come into contact with the juvenile court are considered to be functionally illiterate, and about 70% of inmates score at the lowest proficiency level for reading. And right now, our library facility is not adequate for providing much literacy tutoring, And many libraries have separate study rooms that could be used for more private, and we just don't have the table space really to do much of that. In addition, as many as 61% of low-income families have no books at all in their homes for their children. So if we all work together to support our local library, it will help raise literacy for at-risk children and adults in our neighborhood. Thank you again.
Thank you. Those are all the cards that I had, so I'll turn it over to you, Rita.
Library of Apple Valley. This is their lounge where you can go and sit down and read a magazine or just take a break. If you see the lighting, you see the space. This is a study carrel where they can actually, with their computer or laptop, or read a magazine, but we saw students studying there. Here is the lab. If you notice the number, count the number of computers, please. I'm standing looking at all the books of the beginning of the children's section. And if you see the wall, you see little faces, but all those are children's books. This is where most of the adults meet. There are computers outside the computer lab, and they're available to them, and here are our tables where to study. Again, look at the space and the books in the back. This is the children's center with the giraffe. I thought that was cute. And the tables. Notice that there's a sofa and there's colored tables and little chairs for the children. And the picture in the back is very picturesque. It's, of course, the desert. This is very important. This is the Friends of the Library bookstore. If you look at the books, you can see every single book. They're not piled one over the other. They actually are on shelves. You can go in and look at them and buy them right then and there. Now this is Hesperia. We took a picture of the parking lot. Look at the trees. Look at the pavement. Now, the cars are about the same as in Victorville, so that's not going what I'm saying. I'm saying, look at the landscape. This is the front of the library of Hesperia. This is the community room that before you get into the library, you have a community room for your residents. This is their computer lab. Notice the glass. This is the reception desk. And if you look at the space again, look how nice and wide and long it is. They have something very special that I've never seen. This is brand new to me, and it's a heritage room. This is the room in the library. And you can go in there and read about, I'm certain, about the past of Hesperia. Now we see the city of Victorville. Here's the first sign that I saw, and I didn't know what it meant. Okay? And this is coming off of 7th Street. Not a city-maintained street, it says. It was forewarning me there's something wrong that I am going to travel. This is the problem. This is a private street. It does not belong to the city. Look at all the holes. I thought to myself, you could get killed here. Maybe I'm over dramatic, okay? Again, this is a little worse. This is our parking lot. We have as many cars as everybody else. But look at the street and the pavement before the entrance of our library. This is the entrance to our library, and these books that you see on the shelf, that is the Friends of the Library section. This is our receptionist, and at least you can say, and I will say, and I say this with being proud, we do have good programs. I would say the library is A+. It's just the facility needs a little bit more space. Look at the ceiling for the kids. And these are the tables for the children. This is our computer lab. No windows. At least I didn't see any there. These are our students working. And that is our library. I'm saying to you, since 2006, the city of Victorville accepted to have this library. People use it. They're there elbow to elbow. We have the programs and they do a wonderful job, but they need space. And I don't know, and I don't want to close it, and I don't want to build a new one. I'm going to tell you why. Because it works. It helps. It's there. It supports. It does everything that a library should do. But we need to add more space. And if we cannot expand, then we build up to a second floor where you can put the computer lab, you can put the study carrels, you can put a community room and leave the children on the first floor. The books are there. I'm just simply feel that we need to accommodate our residents. And I don't see anything wrong with the programs. My educational specialist degree and my PhD is in reading. And so I know that looking at the programs, they do a tremendous job. And as I say, I'm very proud of it. But we need to allow for more space so that more residents can actually enjoy having a lounge, a study carrel, more computers available, and have more space to be comfortable. Because, you know, when you're cramped, you just can't study. I don't know about you, but I like to be alone when I study at a table because I throw everything on the table. So I simply would like to say that I feel that we need to have a further discussion on the question of the library. And I did receive from Amy Stanton, and she calls it the Library Design Committee recommendations. But these were made in 2007, and I think it's a good point to start. But we need the librarians and the staff to help us further to bring it up to date, because the question of the library is a place of learning. It builds character. And for many children who may not have books at home, it may be the only place that they are going to learn that their parents will take them to, because it's free and it's beautiful, it's comfortable, and it's enjoyable. There's nothing like going to the library and having somebody read to you, and they do that. And so I'm asking that the City Council look at a further discussion of what can we do for our city library. So I move that we continue our discussion of the City Library of Victorville.
Second. But I agree.
I have a motion by Mayor Pro Tem Ramirez and a seconded by Councilmember Cox. Any further comments?
Yes. Because, well, technically, procedurally, this is a discussion item only, so we shouldn't be making motions. That said, we are going to, just by virtue of what we did earlier this evening, going to have a further discussion because this council approved the 1920 budget wherein we appropriated $50,000 to conduct a library study. For me, this is the logical first step to determine what decisions will need to be made on a go-forward basis. As part of that study, I would be interested to learn whether it would be feasible for us to become part of the San Bernardino County Library branch system, especially since we no longer have access to redevelopment funds to modernize and ramp up services, which was a contributing factor for our having become independent years ago. While I tend to favor local control, if there would be considerable benefit across time to our reuniting with the county system, then it would be incumbent upon us to at least evaluate that possibility. There certainly in this study, I would imagine that there's going to be a lot of things that have to be questioned, whether how many people go to the library. Do we need to have a library at another facility? Do we upgrade this one? Certainly, I would think that some of the concerns that are going to have to be looked at is the fact that this is a private road. To my knowledge, it's never gotten better, and I don't see it getting any better. And the city can't effectively engage in any of the repairs because, as I understand it, that commits us forever to do repairs and maintenance on that. So I'm so happy that we're going to do this study. It's much needed. It's going to give us the objective data that this council is going to need to make decisions that are best for all of our residents. And I, having been a school board trustee for many, many years, I'm certainly in favor of that in which helps our students adopt a philosophy in life where they love learning. I do want to thank the Friends of the Library for the correspondence and the passion that the organization has for our community and our children. My husband, not a friend of the library himself, is a friend of the library, loves that library. So again, I want to thank all of the members of our community who have weighed in on this. It matters to me personally. I consider all of those things in my decisions here behind the dais. Madam Mayor, thank you.
Yes. We often talk about the quality of life for a community and some of those things that may be not used by everyone, not needed by everyone, but they make up the community. Good schools, good public safety, good roads, good jobs. If you look at different cities that set goals, you'll also find that they include good libraries. It is essential for the quality of life, for the young, for the old, and everyone in between. Now, we belonged to the County Free Library System at one time. Back in 2007, the City Council decided to break from that because there were going to be redevelopment funds. Redevelopment funds are gone. We don't know. We do know that the library system is serving people from the unincorporated area. That's good. But there may be a way to provide grants, join with schools, join with county. I think what's most important is that we make a concerted effort to proceed united to improve and expand the library. And if we do that, we will find a way to do it.
Yes. So I went out and also asked individuals what a future library would look like. And I had individuals look at a library, look at it as a virtual library. You can see in schools our kids are using iPads. Most of us are on our phones doing many of our business-related duties, and our children are growing up the same way. They've already have iPads, they have phones, they're 2, they're 3, and this is how they're going along. So when I was finding out that a virtual library is merely a collection of resources that's available on one or more computer systems where the single interface or the entry point to the collections is provided, I thought we need to start looking at something futuristic. We can't continue to have the same ideology that we had 80 or 90 years ago. We have to now look forward and to what our technology is going through. We just, council approved technologies, ALPS, for technology in being able to create the dissemination of information and getting whatever needs to be get a hold of with data and crime. So the same thing is with our technology in the library. You have to start looking at the library and how you maintain that space and create that space. And it's by the use of bringing in virtual libraries. Our books are downloadable. We look at stuff, documentaries online. Everything we're starting to do is online, and we're moving towards that direction. So when that was brought to my attention, I thought it would be a perfect way to start thinking about digital repositories, starting to think about those digital collections that are online, that are accessible, that can include any kind of still images, any audio, any video, any digital media formats. And that's what these constituents contribute to today and what it means to have and look at the future of a library, not just reorganize and declutter and reclutter and say this is what we have new, but actually bringing in the technology and the software to be able to maintain and hold something at this level. And now you don't have to be worrying about the maintenance of so much of these books and the transportation of them. They're just a click away from your phone, from whatever cloud repository that we're connected to. And so I appreciate the fact that I had individuals who came up with this idea and granted me the lucky voice of being to say, let's try that digital virtual library as the new role of our futuristic perceptions of what it is to look at a library in the city of Victorville.
Okay, so then your motion?
My motion is that we continue the discussion on the question of the library and take into consideration the information that we received from Amy Stanton regarding their original evaluation as to what was needed, and to bring it updated with the present staff and library so that we can work together and do it right the first time.
Madam Mayor, I'm going to make a point of order. May I state my point? Thank you. So this item was posted on the agenda, and it was actually requested as a discussion-only item. It was, in fact, posted that way. It would be a breach of the Brown Act to take action on an item that was posted as discussion only.
I think we can get to the same place if you make your motion under item E. Was it E3, I believe it is, for
Yes.
council members. So, Councilmember Ramirez, if you do it during E3, I think we get to the same place.
Yep.
Just a procedural correction.
So this was discussion only? Okay, so end of discussion, and now we move on to public comments.
Yes, and then so bring up the motion again on when we get to item E3.
Yep. Oh, you can make your motion.
Second it again.
I make a motion of the library be...
No, I'll tell you when. I'll tell you when. At this time, we will be moving on to public comments. I do have a few cards here. Arlene, oh yeah, okay. And after Arlene will be Robert Harriman.
Yes, hello. I am coming forth to you today because I have a concern about the landscaping on Amethyst Avenue, that main thoroughfare that you've talked about that you want to expand and stuff. On the east side of the street between Bear Valley and North Star Avenue. I called Public Works in January to report weeds and trash along this area. A woman took a report and said she would get a work order to take care of it. Workers did come out, but instead of pulling the weeds or killing the weeds, they used a weed eater to just cut them down. So with all the rain we have received, the weeds grew back within 2 to 3 weeks, bigger and better than ever. I called again in February and talked to the same woman. She recognized my voice and was surprised that I called back so soon. I explained that the weeds had returned, and she said she would put in a work order for them to kill the weeds. Nothing was done. I called again about 2 weeks later, and a different woman told me that they were behind and I needed to give her my name and phone number if I wanted something done, and a person from the city would call me back and let me know when they would get to it. No one ever called me back. I called in March and could not talk to anyone. I called in April after Easter. Again, the operator transferred me to a voicemail. When I called back and asked the operator to find someone for me to talk to, she hung up on me. I called again and told her she hung up on me and there was no apology, not an explanation, nothing. She again transferred me to a voicemail. I left a message. Nothing again has been done. I called in May and again have only gotten a voicemail. I told them that for 3 months I have been calling about this situation, and if this were a private home, notices would be sent out to clean it up. Yet the city does nothing to clean up their areas. You talk about customer service and how it's important and how you want to have people be able to call the city, but to be able to call the city, you need to get a hold of somebody. You need to have people that aren't going to hang up on you, that aren't going to be rude to you, that are going to listen to you, that are going to answer your questions. And that's not what I found. I have lived in Victorville for 30 years and have been proud of this city. I take care of my home and would expect that the city take care of the appearance of our neighborhoods. Weeds are 2 to 3 feet high, extending onto the sidewalk. Trash is caught in the weeds and it looks horrible. As a citizen, I would hope that something gets done about the situation. Thank you.
Thank you. Robert Harriman. After Robert will be Deanne Hodgins.
Council. In trying to get the meetings to go a little better for the future, Mrs. Gomez is real concerned that everybody understands. She goes through all her questions. If she could just ask one question at a time, the whole audience would maybe be able to grab a little more of what she's trying to ask. Several times tonight I heard her rattle off 5 questions in a row, and even the person that come up to answer the questions had to back up and ask her to repeat some. So if you could just ask one question at a time. No? Oh, okay. All right. Secondly, her questions are prepared. She reads them. Some of these questions, when she goes through the staff report, they're very simple questions to just ask before the council meeting. She doesn't know what a CC&R is. I don't understand that. A lot of this stuff is common knowledge. She says she's going to get a degree in public administration. Is that what it was? So I would hope that maybe you do good, because you need a lot to learn. So when you ask a question to one of the staff here, if you could ask one question at a time, and then me and everybody else can understand the answer, and maybe when they answer that question, it will answer maybe some of your other questions that you have prepared. Okay? I would appreciate that. Okay? You're always looking out for the community. I understand that. And the small person, some of those are in here. So rattling off 5, 7 questions at a time isn't helpful. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you. Deanne Hutchins.
Good evening, Council. I just wanted to make a comment. My understanding of a public hearing doesn't, if someone wants to have input into it, doesn't require a speaker card. That's just my understanding, that a public hearing, once opened, anybody can speak, anybody can offer any kind of input, and they don't have to have had provided a speaker card in advance. Anyway, now to my comments. Councilmember Gomez, again, I ask why you don't understand the appropriate role of an elected city council member when the voters of the city of Victorville elect all members to the council. You certainly have attended numerous conferences and seminars, including orientation when you were first elected over 2 years ago. Within that time, someone who is interested or competent should understand their role. At the last meeting, you attempted to move for an increase in hours and wages for some city employees. Is that to gain their favor? Why do you think you are permitted to make changes to a budget with absolutely no knowledge on how that will affect the overall budget? You were not elected to micromanage the city. You were one of 5 persons we, the citizens of Victorville, elected to govern, not where am I? Take over the duties of hired employees. You were elected, not hired. The budget workshop offers opportunities for your input. Your actions are grandstanding. As a resident and a taxpayer in Victorville, it's frightening to have one council member think she has the authority to implement such action. In researching the duties and responsibility of an elected council member, in addition to managers and staff, council sets policy, votes to approve budget, and evaluates the staff they hire. The manager and staff offer professional advice in addition to enact and execute policy and carry out day-to-day operations. I'm certain, and that's pretty basic, I understand that. And I'm sure that information has been offered in many of the trainings and conferences and seminars that you've attended. When elected, a council member should recognize that they are different than before they were elected, but they shouldn't fall into the trap of thinking they are very special. Take your role seriously, not yourself. A very important duty and responsibility of being an effective council member is to be prepared and do your homework. Asking an inordinate number of questions in meetings makes you appear unprepared and amateurish. Conduct yourself at a meeting in a professional manner. Critique the idea, not the person. Agree to disagree instead of being disagreeable or accusatory. Whining and acting picked on is not a good attribute for a council member. City council decisions, it's about the majority, not the individual. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Those are all the cards that I had under public comments. And now we move on to E2, report from City Manager.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. Community services activities, got quite a few starting up. First, Friends of the Library movie rental program is continuing the entire month of June. That's rent one movie, get one free, and that's benefiting the Victorville Library. We've got a summer reading program starting as well. We've got a children's show at the library starting Thursday, June 6th. And that's also at the Victorville Activity Center. Adult Soccer League is starting up. Early bird registration is June 6th, 5 p.m. at the Hook Community Center. And then we've got a number of day camps, summer day camps starting. Hot Tot Summer Camp, ages 3 to 5. That'll be weekly during the June 10th through August 8th. Information will be found at the Hook Community Center. That's where the activities will be occurring. The Kids Club also, ages 6 to 12, has got a program that's conducted over at the Doris Davies Park. More information, we can share that with you through the Community Services Department. And that's all I have at this time.
Thank you. Now we move on to E3. And this is for council member discussion and possible action regarding items for the upcoming City Council agenda. 3-minute time limit. Ms. Ramirez, now you can request.
I'd like to make the motion to put the study of the library on the agenda.
Second.
Motion made by Mayor Pro Tem Ramirez, seconded by Councilmember Cox. All those in favor?
I have
I have
comments.
clarification.
Clarification, yes, actually. So I understand that we want to have an ongoing discussion, but now the request is to agendize the study, but we haven't conducted the study. We haven't undertaken it yet. So I just need clarification as to what your intention is.
I would like for it to be on the agenda because of the fact that we need to do the study that was done in 2007 and bring it update so that the master plan design can be decided one way or the other. The $50,000 that has been set aside is for a study. And that's what I would like to start with, that study discussion, because this paper that was given to me that was written in 2007 is very good, and it's very, very detailed. However, I don't know how updated it is and whether it's the same or whether the Friends of the Library would even want to say, well, no, we don't want to do that anymore. Things have changed in the last 12 years, so we need to make certain that we are current with what is needed and with those people who are experts. So I'm simply saying is that we should put it on the agenda and discuss the design of the future library of the city of Victorville.
So I guess I still don't understand, because my general impression in business is when you undertake a study, then you let the study do that work. So perhaps Mr. Metzler could help me with that.
Call it a workshop.
Yeah, and so our plan going forward is once the budget year starts, with the budget now that we have just approved, we would actually undertake that same work that I think you're talking about. It may look at, obviously, the work that was done, but certainly would do the work of not only conducting interviews and reviewing existing conditions, probably identify the wants and needs of the council and the Friends of the Library, but also taking into consideration what's trending in libraries at other locations. And so I think that's the work that we're expecting to get out of the consultant, that we would, after soliciting an RFP and going through selections of qualified candidates, then we'd start that work process. So I think at this point it might be a little early. In fact, I would encourage it's probably a little early to dive too deep into that until we start getting some feedback from the respondents to the RFP.
So I do believe we need to do the study so that we can bring it up to date. And then after that, we can have the discussion or a workshop, whichever you decide you would like to have at that time. Okay, so at this time, did you have something else you wanted to agendize? No? Okay.
I do, Madam Mayor. Thank you. I have two agenda item requests. I'm interested in an agenda item in which we consider approving council member attendance at the League of California Cities' upcoming 2019 annual conference by considering this well in advance of the event. And should there be council approval, we would qualify for a discounted early bird registration rate. With that said, I move that the council place on the next agenda an item in which we take action to determine whether to approve council member attendance at the League of California Cities 2019 annual conference and expo being held October 16 through 18 at the Long Beach Convention Center.
I'll second that.
I have a motion by Councilmember Jones, seconded by Councilmember Cox. Any further comments?
Yeah, I wanted to comment, as I was for Rita's agenda. She wanted to agendize something, and I didn't have the opportunity to speak when Mrs. Jones was already providing her information. I just wanted to also reiterate the importance of viable data and an analysis, materials that need to have some kind of teeth so that we can gnaw on to be able to have a productive and a conducive convening of what it is that we're discussing. Is every time we agendize something and we don't have materials to read, I got this at the very last moment, so I didn't have an opportunity to look at what is Amy Staten's perspective and what she said. So it's always important to have information to be able to dissolve and digest it. So that was my comment for that.
I have a motion by Councilmember Jones, seconded by Councilmember Cox regarding the annual League conference. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you. And Madam Mayor, I have a second request. As I mentioned earlier this evening, I'm surprised that projected legal expenses haven't reduced more, considering major settlements have occurred in the last 6 months. The council, I believe, would benefit from a rundown of legal expenses for a period of up to the past 12 months to help us gain a better understanding of the basis for the 2019-2020 budget appropriation and expected trends. With that said, I move that the council place on the next agenda an item wherein the council determines whether it wishes to direct the city manager to provide the council with a report that unpacks legal expenses for a period of up to the past 12 months.
I'll second that.
I have a motion by Councilmember Jones, seconded by Councilmember Gomez. Any further comments?
Question of staff, is that all legal or just general fund?
General fund legal is my intention.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 All those opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. That's all I have.
Yes, we had a lady come up here saying that customer service is really important in her personal experience. In her words, or that there was none. Whether that is true or that's a perception, it's definitely on the record, and I don't think she's the only one. Sometimes it could be we're having a bad day, or it could be that we're essentially not providing good service that particular moment. And for that being, there's an application that I've suggested on many occasions. It's called Go Request. Many cities use it, like San Bernardino, and all someone does is get on the computer, place their complaint, and anyone can track it to see if its viability has gone through and it's already been settled. Something of that nature for a city of this category, I think, would benefit our residents. They don't just come and spend 3 minutes, 5, 6 hours, 3 hours sitting there to give a 3-hour comment and then leave. I think there's a responsibility upon all of us to at least be considerate for one that could be talking for at least 30 people. And so I like to agendize the discussion and possible action to implement a program and adopt this Go Request, which is already online and it's already functioning. And if data can be supplied by staff, that's even much better.
Was that a motion?
Yeah, that was a motion.
Second.
Motion by Councilmember Gomez, seconded by Councilmember Cox. Any further comments?
Yes. What I would hope would come out of this is a discussion. I know that the city manager has told people, if something like this happens, call me now, because I know it's not acceptable. It's not acceptable to him. It's not acceptable to his staff. And it's really disheartening to hear this happened 3 and 4 and 5 months ago, that they hung up on me or didn't call. I want the public to know that if they run into that kind of a problem, they can pick up the phone and call City Hall and ask for a council person, ask for the city manager. That's not acceptable. We don't want it. He doesn't want it. I think we need to have a discussion on the agenda so the public will understand that this is not acceptable to our city manager. It's not acceptable to the mayor and council. And if we have to do something about it, we will. I know the city manager will be looking into this immediately. I have run into this in other cities. I've never run into it in Victorville. I know that it probably occurs. I say probably because it can always happen. But we tell people who come up here we will follow up. I'm sure somebody's going to follow up with this lady. But I want it agendized because I want the public to know that we're better than that. And if we have to agendize it to have the discussion, to get that point to the public, then that's why I'm seconding this motion.
I have a motion by Councilmember Gomez, seconded by Councilmember Cox. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 All those opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Okay, now we move on to A4. Reports from council members, 3-minute time limit. I'll start with Ms. Gomez.
I don't really have too much to say, so I'm going to go ahead and just thank everybody who's watching, whether it's via social media or if you have to stay here, and watch the entire communication. I laud you for even taking that time. And I'm going to say the same thing in Spanish as I usually do, not to oust, because I do have a second language that I do use. Quiero dar las gracias a las personas que se quedaron aquí un largo tiempo. A veces no tienen el tiempo para quedarse aquí o necesitan que hacerlo por trabajar. De todas maneras, quiero darle, si están mirando por las redes sociales o están aquí y están teniendo tanto tiempo, les agradezco que usen su tiempo un día o 2 horas o 15 horas para ver qué es lo que está sucediendo con sus regidores aquí enfrente de la ciudad de City Hall. Gracias.
Yes, Madam Mayor, thank you. So first and foremost this evening, I want to offer my most sincere condolences to Mrs. Almond in the passing of her husband. My thoughts and prayers are with her and her family. I'm quite confident that the rest of my colleagues behind this dais and the employees here at the city offer their condolences as well. As many of you may know, Mrs. Almond was a sitting council member here for approximately 15 years, so our hearts, our thoughts, and our prayers are with her and her family. Over Memorial Day weekend, I attended a classic car show at Sunland Ford to benefit St. Mary's Pediatric Center. It was quite a fun event. And then I was honored to participate in the opening ceremony for the San Bernardino County Fair with Mayor Garcia and many other dignitaries. I do want to thank staff for the exceptional budget presentation. I know that budget preparations are hair-pulling, mind-numbing kinds of events, and I know that the intention was to make this a high-level presentation, but I appreciate that there was just enough detail in it that we could really sink our teeth into and help us inform our decisions. So thank you. I think you did an amazing job with it. In a couple of days, we're going to be at the 75th anniversary of D-Day, and I hope that all of us can appreciate the great sacrifices that were made for the freedoms that we enjoy today. Many brave people lost their lives, and many brave people were forever hurt by those experiences, but they did it for our benefit today. So I hope that we all will take a moment or two in a couple of days to remember that. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
They say honor your father and mother. Happy Father's Day.
Very good.
I do, but it's late. We've been here long enough.
Well, I did attend the viewing for Mr. Almond, and I related to the grief that the family is suffering at this moment. I lost my husband right after I was elected to the city council, so I do understand. But anyhow, that's all that I'm going to say because it is late and we need to continue in the morning. So this meeting is adjourned.